Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the City of East Providence City Council meeting. In addition to the City Council meeting this evening, we'll also be having a joint session with the school committee. However, before we do so, and we stand, I'm going to ask that we have the Pledge of Allegiance first. And I'd like to introduce the Boy Scouts, if they can come on up and start us off or lead us all into the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll finish off, or we'll go into a couple of city council matters, and then we'll lead right into the school committee joint session meeting.
The troop of the year. They're the troop of the year.
And I want to congratulate Boy Scouts for Troop of the Year as well. Sophie. And thank you all for attending this evening. May we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Scout salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, let me start off with a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Councilman Cahoon?
Here.
Councilman Morado?
Here.
Councilwoman Souza? Here. Council Vice President Rodrick?
Aye.
And
Here.
Council President Brito?
Aye. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is Veterans Observance by City Council. Council Vice President Rodrick.
Thank you, Madam Clerk and Mr. President. On behalf of the entire City Council, we are pleased tonight to dedicate this meeting and all of our deliberations to the month of November, which is traditionally Veterans Appreciation Month. And we are able to have these democratic meetings and to have free public meetings due to the sacrifices made by the many veterans, many who are here tonight, I'm glad to see, and many others throughout East Providence, throughout Rhode Island, throughout the country. Because of your efforts, we are able to conduct meetings like this. Over 2,335 veterans reside in East Providence. And a quick breakdown tells us that there are 687 from the Vietnam War, 473 from Korea, the First Gulf War, 287, the Second Gulf War, 221, and World War II, 163. Still living in East Providence. And I may be off by a couple, we go by census numbers. Many others we know lost their lives to protect the rest of us that were from East Providence. Also, we have the famous Amaral brothers. 5 brothers served in World War II at the same time. One is still with us, however, he's not here tonight. He resides at the Bristol Veterans Home, and that was contribution from an East Providence family that we're all very proud of. We also want to thank our guests for joining with us tonight in this salute. Of course, all of the school committee who is here, our Mayor Bob Da Silva, saw Senator Val Lawson. I don't know if the other reps, the senators, Senator Cindy Coyne is here, and thank you for coming to help with this celebration. We can't identify all of the veterans here tonight. We did not do an RSVP. It was kind of informal. It was mostly through word of mouth. But we did ask one veteran in particular to be representative of all of our veterans. With war raging on during World War II, one young man, George Donovan, left high school to fight for this country. He served in the South Pacific. He also served in the North Atlantic from 1945 to 1948 with the U.S. Navy and the Coast Guard. Donovan saw military action on ships and on islands, and did it in a day when there really was no radar. There was certainly no computers or technology that we know of today. He was a radio operator, not only in the Southwest Pacific, also, as I said, the North Atlantic Weather and Ice Patrol. George, I would have picked the Pacific if I could have had that choice. He also served at the time with his twin brother, Jim. The two of them served together. He also has a daughter who's a retired U.S. Naval commander, and certainly their family has contributed a lot. After George Donovan returned from the war, he completed his high school education, and he became a teacher. He worked at our Central Junior High for a little while, and then East Providence High School, where he put in some 30 years as one of our more respected teachers. In 1962, he was appointed the official videographer and photographer for the East Providence Fire Department. It was a volunteer job with no pay, and he used his audio-visual background to create many training films for the fire department and also the police department. And I think some of them are still being used, and he did some of this pretty recently. He also was a news photographer for Channel 10 back in the day. He also began the first police, fire, schools, emergency response training effort in East Providence to keep our schools safe from disaster. And as an audiovisual guy, he started the first, what I affectionately call the Townie Sports Network. And that's when I got to work with him a little bit, where he would videotape games of student athletes and put them on cable television. And those who enjoy watching city council meetings and school committee meetings on television owe it to George Donovan, because he started the group with a couple other friends, but he was the lead behind it, that videoed all of the meetings for free. They were volunteers. And if you remember those days of watching on public access TV, the city council, the school committee, the zoning board, and various other meetings, George did that for the city. He is truly a treasure to East Providence. And I was so pleased to have come to know him through the years, as are all of the veterans that are assembled here today. True to the greatest generation, and true to most veterans, I asked him if he would say a couple of words tonight. He politely declined and said he just wants to be with the group that is here. But I am going to make him rise and at least be acknowledged. Would you please greet U.S. Naval and Coast Guardman George Donovan. Now that everyone is seated, I would ask all the other veterans who made it here tonight to please rise and be acknowledged, along with George. At this time, finally, as our final dedication to you, the veterans of East Providence and of America, before we have the national anthem, we've invited East Providence High School graduate 2018, Danny Strother, who is now a music student at Providence College, to sing the national anthem. But before he does that, we have the East Providence Police Color Guard, who will do their thing, come forward, and once the Color Guard is ready, Dan, it's all yours. So at this time, if you would hold your attention for the Honorable East Providence Police colors.
You should be standing. Then we'll stand. That was very good. Yeah, very good.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you. That concludes the formal program. I also want to thank Chief of Police Nevis, who is here and helped with the ceremony, and our Fire Chief, who's also here, Chief Quick. Thank you for your support. And, of course, I would acknowledge our own at the dais here, U.S. Air Force Officer Nate Cahoon, and thank you for your service to the nation.
I'd like to also thank Lieutenant Colonel Charles Childress, United States Army.
28 proud years we're in the uniform of the United States Army, the Army Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Councilman, for that heartwarming dedication. In the 4.5 years plus that I've served on this council, it's nice to see and hear the words that came out this evening. And thank you all, thank you veterans for serving us as well. Madam Clerk, may we proceed? I'm going to ask the council at this point in time, because we do have some people here to that we would like to get out, that we can, at the pleasure of the council first and foremost, that we prior to going into the joint session meeting, if we can go over to page 3 in ordinances, A, public hearing for final passage for vote, and then we have the adopting of the East Providence Waterfront Special Development Ordinance.
That would be the second and final passage for vote. It's also a public hearing adopting an amended East Providence Waterfront Special Development District Tax Increment Financing Plan, the amended project plan, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance certain public infrastructure and public improvements necessary in connection with the Unical site project. This is sponsored by Councilman Brito. The full ordinance is on clerk base, and it is a public hearing.
Before we get started on this final and public hearing vote, I'd like to first seal the minutes from executive session.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you, Councilwoman.
You're welcome.
Again, this is a public hearing at this point in time, so anyone from the public here wishing to speak for or against this ordinance, please step up to the podium. And I'm going to ask this question one more time before we proceed as a council to vote on this ordinance. Anyone from the audience wishing to speak for or against this ordinance, please step up to the podium. With that being said, public comment is now closed, and it's at the pleasure of the council at this point in time.
Mr. President, I make a motion to accept the ordinance and amendment of Chapter 19, the revised ordinance of the City of East Providence entitled Zoning, as presented on the docket.
Second
passage.
No. Second page. TIF first.
Oh, the TIF.
Waterfront.
So the waterfront, I apologize, I'm going to retract that. Make a motion to pass the waterfront special development tax increment financing plan, authorizing the issuance of a bond to finance certain public infrastructures and public improvement necessary in connection with the Unical site project.
Second. So we have a motion on the floor by Councilwoman Souza, seconded by Councilman Cahoon. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next item, please.
Would you like to cover the next ordinance, Council
Next
President?
ordinance.
Public hearing and final passage for vote, an ordinance and amendment of Chapter 19 of the revised ordinances of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Zoning.
Again, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this ordinance, please approach the podium. Sir?
Mr. President, members of the council, my name is John Garrahy. I'm an attorney for the petitioner with respect to this rezoning application. The application seeks to rezone 360 and 362 Taunton Avenue from a C3 zone to a C4 zone. It's a relatively modest change to allow the uses in this parcel to be consistent with the neighboring land parcels, and as well to allow the existing car wash to remain a legal use therefore. It has been vetted by the Planning Department, who recommended approval. It has been approved by the Planning Board, who unanimously recommended approval. The owner of the property, Mr. Savage, is here. If you have any questions for him or for me, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
This is a public hearing, and at the pleasure of the council, I'll ask the council to speak first, and then we can have anyone from the public come up who could speak for or against this. So again, I'm going to ask the council at this point in time, they're requesting at this point is to change the zoning from C3 to C4. This is on Taunton Avenue, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
Do you have a physical address number for this, sir?
360 to 362 Taunton Avenue.
Mr. President?
Yes.
You mentioned only minor changes. Could you describe what they are?
So the changes allow some of the automotive uses, which are next door. For automotive uses, a car wash, for example, is on that site, a canned car wash, which is on that site. And that would be allowed in that use. It is not presently allowed in that use. And those types of things. There are very few distinguishing uses which are not allowed. Basically, they allow the automotive uses that are allowed across Taunton Avenue as well, which is in the C4 zone.
So, Councilman, do you have any further questions?
No, go ahead.
No, thank you.
So, when the owner and operator of that car wash, it is not the property owner, correct?
He's not. He's a
Okay,
tenant.
so he's a tenant that's there.
That's correct.
And they had to come before the city for licensing for that property, correct? I would imagine.
If I may.
Yes,
John
please.
Savage. I'm not quite certain about that. They were on Broadway, and through a broker, they approached us to relocate there. The place they were on Broadway was expanding and wanted to, there just wasn't room for them anymore. But I'm not sure that they needed to or
So per the zoning of that area, they weren't allowed, per the zoning at that time, to have a car wash, but I'm assuming they may have gotten a variance from the planning board or the zoning board to operate.
I understand now. No, they did not. And the discrepancy was in the ordinance. It talks about a car wash, different from a car detail shop. So down where Dexter's sign is, there used to be and may still be there, a car detail shop, which basically does what this group did. And that is permitted now. But a car wash like the one on Pawtucket Avenue with the machinery and all is not. And so there was some question as to what they really were. Their sign says car wash, but they have no machinery. They do it all by hand, and they detail cars.
Correct.
So I don't think that they were trying to avoid compliance. I think they believed, and candidly as the landlord, I believed that they were in compliance, but the city brought it to our attention that there was an issue with that, and so that's one of the reasons we've put in for this classification to eliminate that issue.
So one of the other issues that arises in that area is, I think the agreement was also to keep the property with a buffer, seeing how that car wash detail, which is a lovely place, details a lot of industrial machinery, equipment, so large tractor trailers, dump trucks, vehicles of that nature. They do occasional motor vehicles, but they primarily do larger industrial-sized vehicles. And with that comes a lot more noise, right, with engines and emission. And having a nursing facility abutted directly across the street, there was an issue with being a good neighbor, with wanting to have good neighbors in business. So there were some requirements that they agreed upon to make sure that they were compliant in being a good neighbor. And I don't believe that they have fulfilled those requirements in doing so. And so that's a concern moving forward. It's not that I have an issue with allotting that zoning to move forward. My concern is giving confidence in the landlord who then rents to your leases, and then them not being compliant with standing up with what their end of the bargain is.
Well, I will say this, that they've made an agreement that they're not complying with. We'll address that quickly. I did notice that not too long ago they brought in a number of, I think they were arborvitaes, the green year-round trees in buckets. I want to say 20 or 30 of them. And I don't know if that was part of, I wasn't aware of any of that, but I just saw them on the property.
Right.
But if that's part of their commitment, then I'll certainly make sure they get planted and maintained.
I'm sure a buffer, and I think that's what those arborvitaes usually, most businesses will use those as a visual and noise buffer, not that it houses a lot of noise, but if you plant enough of them, at least it provides with at least a visual distraction in the area, and, I know that hasn't been done.
Yeah.
The property in itself has, as you know, being the owner, and I don't know if those are all your vehicles, but been like a storage for vehicles.
We've now cleaned out, had some problems with some fire trucks there and a few other things and trailers, and all the tenants have been told they need to go.
Okay. So I think my concern moving forward would be to make sure that there's compliance with all of that and that it doesn't become an eyesore or a nuisance for the community or that zone in the city.
And one of the things we did when we met with the planning board is the architects designed a nice landscape plan with sidewalk and other activity, which I think will be a nice improvement.
Are you going before this planning board soon, or have you recently?
We went to the planning board first and got their unanimous support, having looked at the plan and all of that. And as I said when we were there, I want it to look nice. When that building had been abandoned for almost 10 years. And when we did it, we had an alternative. We could, I liked it because it was an old A&P, and it had, one of the first things we did was restore the cupola up on top. But we did a very nice brick front, as opposed to a significantly less expensive thing to kind of get it to fit in a little bit.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
And for those of you who don't know, this location is the former Standard Hardware, if I'm not mistaken.
Many years ago, A&P, then the Standard Hardware. And Gentleman's Warehouse in between the two, I think.
Okay. So just to backtrack, Mr. Savage, you had indicated that the vehicles that were on the property have been moved or will be?
Almost all of them have been moved now. The bigger ones. There are a couple of trailers that we've given notice to the tenants.
Okay. Because we did, as a council, receive some notification from some concerned neighbors who were, and I'm sure probably they're right behind you, who would like to speak as well as far as this. But they did send the council notification on vehicles that were, you had mentioned a fire truck, there was a boat on there as well, so. Okay.
Absolutely. That will all be cleaned up and is in the process of that.
Again, anyone in the council like that?
I have a couple of questions through the chair. So we received over 60 signatures from residents at the Winslow Gardens, along with photos. And I'm assuming these photos are fairly recent. There's fire trucks and a whole bunch of other abandoned vehicles. How long have these tenants been renting from you, the current tenants?
Most of them, I'm just going through them in my head. I believe most of them have been there since I restored the building, which was probably 5 years ago.
So
give or take a year.
So my question would be, so why wasn't the agreement fulfilled with apparently a berm was supposed to be installed, some type of berm to control noise, and how long have these abrevieties been also installed? My question is, why wasn't this done when that agreement to have that done, why hasn't it taken place? Why has it taken 5 years and some of it has not been completed
yet?
Well,
I will tell you, I'm not aware of that agreement to put them in. The abrevieties I noticed probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I wasn't involved in bringing them in. The car wash gentleman brought them in.
So the agreement to put the abrevieties and the berm was with the tenant?
Yes, it was not. I wasn't aware of that. I just drove by.
Can we get clarification on that anyway?
I'm not aware of the agreement. This whole issue predates my role as city solicitor, so I'm not aware of any agreement. But I believe the planning board may have been aware of that agreement at the time of their approval.
My concern is, I would not want to live, according to these photos, I would not want to live in an area and have to look out my window and see abandoned and junked vehicles, right? So my concern, I think I would probably like to ask Mr. Fazioli to come up, because I'd like to know if this plan, if it's in it tonight to do that, I'd like to know if this plan for the C4 rezoning, and I see there's plans that were submitted, if that's going to be beneficial to the city, and also how can we hold them accountable for those improvements to whatever agreement, is put into place moving forward.
I think Mr. Savage had indicated this evening that they are moving or removing some of the vehicles that were stored there. Now, again, I don't know if they've been removed or not, but worst case scenario, if he's saying that, I would think that you're going to be moving it. They would be out of there.
I can say this for sure, that all of the tenants have been notified that their property has to be out.
So,
and that was done probably 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. The big fire truck was relocate. It was very difficult to remove it because it wouldn't stop, candidly, and had 3 or 4 different people come in, and finally got somebody that could get it started and removed. And so that process, I'm very comfortable making the commitment that a buffer will be put in, whether it's the arborvitaes or whether it's something else more appropriate. Candidly, I'm not very good at that, but I am good at picking up the phone and calling the landscape architect and saying, what should we have? And I will tell you this, and if I make the commitment that that's going to happen, you can go to the bank on that. That's going to happen. And if there's any question about that, I've been doing this type of work for 20 years. I've done it almost exclusively in Pawtucket. Have hundreds and hundreds of square feet of space that we've done there. And if there's any question about that, I know many of you think highly of Jean Boyle. I was with her on a project last night. I'd urge you to give her a call, and I'm sure she would say that if I say we're going to do something, we do it, and we do it better than is expected, because I want it to be nice, just like when we restored the front of that building. That brick facade was over $100,000, and it was just done to make it nice, candidly.
So we do have some people here that want to speak, and I would like if we can have them approach the podium. Just keep in mind you're limited to 3 minutes as you approach the podium. Try to keep your comments within the 3-minute period, please.
Thank you for your time. My name is Sandra Cullen. I'm the administrator of Winslow Gardens. I have worked there for 26 years, and I represent the elderly frail population that lives across from Mr. Savage's property. The pictures you have been sent today are from today. So nothing has been removed. As Mr. Savage has said, the fire truck is still on your property. I have with me John Leland, who has tried to contact the owner of the property in the past with no avail. These trucks and boats and cars without license plates have been there for years. We were told when that property was being built that it was going to be a garage for antique cars. Never was anything said about a car wash. I have residents who have windows facing that side of the door, that side of the street, who complain about dogs barking at night. Apparently there are dogs on the property. They are screeching in the parking lot. They're doing donuts in the parking lot. It is not what we thought it was going to be. So now, with the rezoning, all we can imagine that the junkyard we have next door to us is going to be a bigger junkyard. The building itself is beautifully built. The property itself around it has tires, as you can see, in the bushes. You see, if you look at the picture that I gave you that has like this, these are the arborvitaes dead against the wall all summer long. So there's been lots of promises by Mr. Savage, but I don't see where any of this has anything to do with a car wash, because that's not what we were told it was going to be. Do we even know what? I understand that another 4-bay garage is going to be built. Is that the plan for this rezoning? Because we don't need more car lots in that area. I don't know if this goes against the comprehensive business plan for East Providence, because I know there is one. And I'm not even sure that that car wash is legal. From what I understand, that there's been citations against the car wash business. Only you can find that out for sure. So when I talked to my residents today and explained to them that there was going to be more car bays and they wanted to build more brick-mortar buildings to house antique cars, they said, we want to sign a petition. So that's what you have in front of you today, is a petition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Joan Leland. I live at Winslow Gardens. I would like to amplify a little bit of what was said about the requirement for having the green screening across along Alexander. A couple of years ago, I was interested in this, and I contacted the planning board. And the planning board told me that the permit to operate that car wash was contingent upon putting in this green barrier. And it never happened. Shortly after I talked to them, these trees arrived, as many as 30 or whatever you said, in pots. And some of them are still there by the building, dying one by one in their pots with nothing being done to them. And I would suspect that somebody will have to work hard to make sure that when these are planted, they're planted properly, because Sandra will show you a picture in her arms of the place where they're supposed to go, and it's like where tires have driven, and it's not a place to plant anything. So there's a lot of work to be done there. It's not just an idea of putting them in there. We have 114 residents in Winslow Gardens, and how many in Lynn? 84. We have 200 residents, and if you can imagine, if those residents lived in individual family houses, how much space that would take up on that street. And I'm very concerned that if those people did live there, I'm sure that the Alexander Avenue would not be in the condition it's in with a paving. So that's something else that goes with this. The avenue is almost impossible to drive on and, of course, dangerous to walk on. I'd like to give a couple of other examples. Well, we talked about the screening was made as a condition of the permit to operate that facility by the planning board, and the screening was a condition of the permit. The permit is going on, the activity is going on, but nobody has followed up, the planning board or the applicant. Let's see. I guess I've covered almost everything. My only question is, why do we want to make things worse by giving a zoning change? Doesn't make sense. Thank you.
With that being said, Mr. Savage, how quickly can you react as far as cleaning the property and assure us that going forward that we won't have any of these issues?
What I might suggest along those lines, and I'm happy to do this, number one, the property can be cleared within 30 days. If we weren't coming up for a holiday next week, I would say 2 weeks, but I want to make sure that it's within that. That's number one. Number two, the other thing that I'd be pleased to do is get a landscape architect to meet with a group of the neighbors and let them have input into what that, I don't want to call it a barrier, but what that beautification strip looks like. Because candidly, I want something that's nice there. And there'll be choices. We may not want just a straight hedge. There might be a determination that maybe you have a group of hedges, and then you have some, what I call city trees that are appropriate plantings. We've used them elsewhere. Oftentimes you can get trees that flower in the spring. It's all the same budget for that type of thing, and I'd like something that's nice, and I'm happy to do it in conjunction with the neighbors if they want to form a committee or if they want to nominate a group. My recommendation would be that it be no more than half a dozen or 8 or 9 or 10, because it gets a little unwieldy. But I'm happy to do that. So when we plant it, it's nice.
Okay. Would that be satisfied? Would that work with the neighbors, with the abutting property to have it cleared? Well, in addition to that, I mean, we can always revisit this as well at the council. the way I'm looking at it. I'm just trying to make it accommodating for both sides. So in the case here where Mr. Savage said in a public forum to the council that within 30 days he can have these vehicles removed, we can set up some type of committee with a landscaper and review all this stuff. Would that be something that you can entertain?
Is there any clarification on the legality of that?
Excuse me, the meeting's being taped. Could you use the mic if you're going to speak? Thank you.
Council President, can I call up Faziola?
Yeah.
Is there any clarification of the legality of that car wash being there in the first place?
Not through the council at this point in time. I think maybe through Mr. Fazioli, as the councilman wanted to bring him up, have him speak up.
I think Mr. Savage already conceded that a car wash is not permitted in that
That's
zone.
a detail.
Right.
Okay.
So under a C3 zone, passenger vehicle car wash is not permitted.
Okay.
The reason why we're going to a C4 is because it's permitted in a C4. So we're trying to clear up that.
And if I may clarify that, when we put that car wash in there, again, car wash it sounds simple, but is it mechanical or is it not? Is it like the one on Pawtucket Avenue, or is it like the one where Dexter sign was? And I told the city, they've got 10 or 15 employees there, maybe on sometimes maybe even a little more than that. And I said, if you don't want them there, just shut them down. And I'd find something else. I didn't want to do that. I'm a big believer in small business. I think that's how you grow communities. I'm not a big institution type create jobs at big institutions. I think you do it grassroots, and that was in part a catalyst for this. And so it should be simple. Is it legal or is it not? It's more complicated than that because of that that nuance.
Very good. Mr. Fazioli, will you mind?
So I believe in the ordinance, it just says car wash, there's no specifics. So as it stands, and I think this is one of the reasons why the owner of the property, and I'm probably assuming Mr. Faziola, our director, has brought this up because it's not in compliance, and to try to bring it into compliance as a business owner, we want to put it on the books. My other concern, well, I'll let you speak first.
Sure. I've been here 2 months, and this project came across my desk within the second day, I believe I was here, was this issue. And I drove by the property as well, and I understand it's not in the condition we want to see it, and I can understand the residents and the neighbors' concerns that it's not exactly what we want to see there. So I got quickly briefed on it, and I understood it's been an issue that's been on the books since 2016 when the planning board initially acted on this, and since then there's been some referrals to municipal court. There's been some zoning violations recorded, but the municipal court, from what I understand, preferred to have this remedied through a zone change, if possible, if we could get the applicant and the owner to agree to certain things as he improved the project. And one of the things that part of the planning board decision with the condition was that in order, even before he gets a building permit, he must seek a DPR approval, which is an administrative process that would have to meet minimum standards for stormwater control, landscaping, and parking, and also additional lighting and all of that. So we've had a preliminary meeting with the applicant to outline our concerns and to spell these things out. Pending this zoning change, if it goes through, he would have to come back to us from the planning department, present a plan that satisfies our criteria that we've put in here, and that has to be done prior to any building permit being established. If it is somewhat of a goodwill gesture that we're working with the applicant, that he will work to bring the project into conformance with the zoning and improve the landscaping and address the residents' concerns. We just wanted to bring it to a public session and just resolve the issue at the planning level rather than having it go through the municipal court section.
So if I may, Mr. President, Mr. Fazioli, what would be the impact of when we're meeting in December? We've got a meeting on the 2nd. Do we have a meeting scheduled on the 23rd? Or no, that doesn't sound like it would work.
December 3rd is our next meeting. December 3rd.
And then the
December 3rd
17th.
And the 17th. So what would be the impact of tabling this vote until the 17th and seeing what actually gets done to clean up the property?
And I'll let the applicants speak to that, but I believe it's, they wanted to get certain things done prior to the weather turning. There's mobilizing certain, work crews prior to the weather turning to a certain, condition that would prevent work to be done. So they might miss, but I'll let them speak to that. But that was the information presented, that they wanted to get this done in a time frame before the year end closed, so they could start working on it before the weather turned. So again, if we did delay till December, they still have to go to that DPR review process, apply for a building permit. So that would probably add, 4 to 6 weeks to that process.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, I would just think, if local nearby residents had voiced concerns, and those concerns are still present today, and everybody knew that this was coming before the council today, I would have think there would have been at least some activity to, take steps to remedy that before today. Accordingly, I'd be uncomfortable with kind of signing off without seeing any of those actions taken. That's me. Sure.
I can tell you with absolute certainty that other than my discussions with some town officials, I have had no discussion with the neighbors. And I will tell you that I do not get it. It is a joke of people that know me. I always return phone calls within a 24-hour period. Nobody has reached out for me. And I'm not difficult to find.
Okay. As their attorney, no one has reached out. This is their first. I mean, they may have had complaints. They may have gone to the council.
Step up to the podium, sir.
I'm sorry, but they haven't made their way to us, and it's unfortunate that we haven't heard about this until now.
So now that we heard their concerns, and there's quite a few, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fazioli, that there's a lot of stipulations here. Before, whether we approve it tonight or not, there's stipulations that they have to go through, whether it's through the building department and all landscaping.
Satisfy the concerns raised by the planning board.
I'm comfortable personally, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself, with a lot of the stipulations that are in place, and working in conjunction with their neighbors, with the landscape and cleaning up the property. I'm comfortable in moving forward with this, but I would say that, this is a process that needs to start right away, implement your plan of action, I would say right away, so just to show some good faith to the neighbors so they can see, once they see this stuff is being moved out and there's communication along the lines, and maybe perhaps there should be an exchange of contact information as well, that going forward down the lines, that they feel comfortable with what you're looking to achieve in that space.
Two things to address that. I can tell you with certainty that process will begin tomorrow morning with respect to additional removals. And if I can get this evening a contact name at the facility across the street, I'll begin that process that I spoke about earlier about including them in the landscape plan.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I just have a question. So if this was to get approved tonight, how do we, in the future enforce this? Like, how do we, at this point, once it's approved, correct?
They still have to meet certain standards that satisfy our, the planning department's conditions on design, landscaping, stormwater. That's, so that, that rests with me and my department and the planning board. I can't speak to my predecessors. I don't know what appetite they had, but I tend to be a proactive person. That's why it's here tonight. Again, this has been lingering since 2016. The second day I was on the job, I learned about this, and I immediately got it back to the planning board for reconsideration, had Mr. Savage and his attorney come in. So we've met probably, 3 or 4 times since then. So I'm very actively involved in making sure that this property doesn't remain in the condition that it is now.
So will it, in that process, at any other point, will this matter come in front of the council for any other votes?
If there's a violation, I believe that there's a...
I just think it's been lingering since 2016, but it's unfair to this council that we just heard about this tonight also, just as you're saying you're hearing about the complaints. And, me personally, I don't feel comfortable voting on this, moving it forward until we have more proof that this will be complied. We had the Benny's project that came before us. We saw renderings. We had meaningful dialogue as it was, something that was beneficial to the city, and I haven't heard anything like that tonight of putting a car wash there that would be beneficial to the city at this point. And I don't feel comfortable voting on a whim and just hearing, little bits and pieces of information within the past half hour. So that's just my opinion.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Could I ask the representative from Winslow, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, ma'am.
Sandra Cullen, yeah.
Okay, thank you. If, hypothetically, if this were not approved at all, or not approved ever, you'd have to live with the status quo. Is that acceptable? I mean, I believe in the email we got today, there were some other complaints about noise and different things, so that evidently would continue.
Correct.
If this is passed or not passed. So what's preferable to...
When we were first told the property was being redone from the bank and the hardware store to a antique car storage building.
Which it is not?
We see a car wash, and we see boats, and as you can see, there's trucks and fire trucks. There's actually 16 vehicles in there today, all spread out. And now, I believe the bowling alley, is that also part of your property? So that's vacant as well. That was knocked down. So now you can see it from Taunton Avenue. You can see this building. So if the plan is to add on, is that the plan, to add on bays to the building you already have? So that was the information that I received, that there would be more garage bays added on to what's already there. Then how's that look from Taunton Avenue? Is that part of the comprehensive plan for the city of East Providence? To put garage bays, more of them. So that's all right. So that's another subject. But you have a property that's been there 3 years. This is the owner who collects rent from the car wash. So technically, he is in charge of the car wash people. He signed a lease with them, I imagine, and he has no control over the way his property is being taken care of.
So may I ask, Mr. Savage, you're the owner but not the operator? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. May I just take 3 minutes and give a little bit of an overview that I think may be helpful?
Maybe a minute and a half.
Okay, I'll speak as quickly as I can then. This is a very difficult area. That stretch of Taunton Avenue is, I've done development for 35 years. I have probably 800,000 square feet in the city of Pawtucket in 20 different buildings. I brought tenants in from all over the country. And I was very interested in this area of East Providence, in addition to the building that I've developed up at 330 Waterman Avenue. And I will tell you, it is one of the most difficult stretches of property that I've ever dealt with. Partially it's because of the one-way street there. I looked at the buildings down on Edmond Street. I wanted to do a whole complex down there, similar to other developments that have existed mostly in England, but in other parts of this country. And I brought in very specialized tenants. And I will tell you that it was very marginally successful. Very difficult to bring them in. This car wash thing, we can debate whether it's a car wash, whether it's a hand detail shop, but I can tell you that to get investment there and to get tenants there is almost impossible. And to have this type of debate where I've said, I will go in and I will make it nice, and I will work with the neighbors, and I will put up
these buffer areas, and I'll pay for it, and it's something that we can all be proud of. But my goal right now is to get this going now. Why? Because I have 2 projects in Pawtucket, and I have some subs that are coming off, and they're available now. And I will tell you, economically, it's not a very good deal for me. And I'm just being very candid with you. Those that know me or can check it, I put it right out there. In particular, one of the subs approached me and said, I have a hiatus and I want some work, which is not uncommon for subs to approach me that way. And I said, I've got a vacant lot. I'll do something with it if you want to do it. Give me some numbers, put together a package. And that was the catalyst for all of this. So I'm trying to do something in a very difficult area in East Providence. I want to make it nice, just as I did the other building. I'm willing to work with the neighbors, but I just don't have the bandwidth to make it a huge commitment. And I'm sorry. I'm apologetic about that. I'm willing to spend the money. I'm willing to do it with professionals. I'm willing to do it right. But I can't make it a long, drawn-out process. And if you ask Mr. Fazioli, when I went into the meeting in the planning department and the department heads were there, I looked at them and I said, tell me what you want for landscaping, we'll do it.
Can I make a quick suggestion? I don't want to keep, because we have a lot of stuff on the docket. Why don't we do this? My opinion, December 3rd is not far away. You already had a previous commitment to do the items on our property that we discussed, clearing those junk vehicles, planting the arborvitaes or whatever. Why don't you get that going as a good faith effort, right?
Because I can't do the landscaping until I do the other plan, which brings up another difficult point that I shouldn't bring up. When I went to subdivide those lots, I was required to show hypothetical buildings and plans that everybody knew was never going to be built. It cost me $25,000. There's no other city or community in this state that requires that. I did it just to get it done. And to do that kind of planting, require a bond. Require a bond. We pick a number, $10,000. I'll post a bond tomorrow, or as soon as I can get it. I'll begin it in the morning. If you can approve this, I'll post a bond, a landscaping bond.
I'm not even going to go to that point and ask you to post a bond. I take your word for it. I mean, you have a substantial investment there. You have a number of hurdles that you have to go over, regardless of, what we vote on, or if we approve this evening. You still have other hurdles that you have to deal with zoning and planning as well. So it doesn't stop here with our vote as far as I'm concerned. We have an individual who's investing in our community who just needs to address some issues and concern, which he's stating publicly this evening, that he's willing to work with the neighbors. And with that being said, I take your word for it, that you'll begin tomorrow. Within 30 days, the property will be cleared up. You can move on with your landscaper, get the property designed. Within 30 days, you can have several meetings. You can have one meeting or two meetings with your neighbors to accommodate the needs. And I'm happy with what you've said this evening. And I personally want to wrap this up. I think you said enough. I'm convinced. I don't want to hold your business up as well. And with that being said, I'm really ready to move forward with a vote, provided that the council is at this point in time.
I tend to agree. I think that at the risk of sounding crude, there are new sheriffs in town. We're now checking everything. We're making sure promises are being kept. I don't know what happened in the past. I wasn't here. Some of us weren't here. We have new administration and things like this we're keeping on top of. And if it's not done, I don't know who the residents went to. It sounds like they didn't go to the owner. I don't know. The city council didn't seem aware, but it's not their fault. They went to someone. Some of those people are no longer in the city. So I know this is one council person that's not going to allow something like this to not happen. So I'm willing to move forward.
And I will make a personal effort as well to get involved, to work with the neighbors and make sure that this whole thing comes to fruition and work with, both the neighbors and the you, Mr. Savage, to see to it that this comes to come through.
There's another gentleman, I think that.
How you doing? My name is Joseph Avaristo, and I live across the street from Winslow. I can pretty much echo what Sandra had said and the other lady. I've been less than thrilled with the car wash being there. At the very beginning, I would actually see people doing donuts in a red, unregistered Mustang through that parking lot. Then we would see, maybe during the winter, people racing around in ATVs. I feel like that if it's the summertime, they're having cookouts there, playing music. And I'm not saying it's every day. I'm not saying, it's once every 2 or 3 months. But it just seems like, it just does not seem like that the car wash fits in to the neighborhood. To see the actual fire engines that were sitting there, okay, the trailers, now we got a boat that has got to be, 50, 60 feet long, still there. And then, again, you see a lot of industrial vehicles going in to be washed. I understand it's a business. Nobody wants to lose their job or anything like that, small businesses. But you get other people pulling in there with sports trucks racing in and out of there. I can basically see this place. I'm right across the street. I don't miss a thing. A lot of times I can work from home. And as I said, I pretty much echo what has been said by the two ladies here. That's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions for me? Or?
Well, my only question would be, I'm just hoping that we can force this issue by making them, which they said they're going to do, get rid of all that stuff. If we don't move forward, it's going to stay there.
I understand.
And you're going to keep looking at it. So
but I mean,
let's push them legally and otherwise to do what he said he's going to do, clean it up starting tomorrow morning. And if it isn't, we have a legal department, we have a police department. Let's go after them.
And I understand that, and that's great. But it's also a combination of that. But it's also the behavior of the people that are running the car wash. So that's just something to consider.
So one of the things, if I may, with this ordinance change from a C3 to a C4, it's now allowing legally to store vehicles on the property where currently you're not supposed to. So we're giving them, so what's currently being practiced on that property is illegal per the city ordinance. So this would just allow for current behavior to stay there within legal rights to do so. Not that I'm against having car lots and such, but making it a graveyard for vehicles that aren't operable or just
No.
storage is not,
Outside
for the...
storage is not allowed under any part of your ordinance.
Right, correct.
Not in the C3, not in the C4.
And if the vehicle does not have a tag on it, those vehicles can be towed as well, if I'm not mistaken as well. So a lot of this is police matter, if I'm not mistaken.
Property tows have to be at the request of the owner.
We have the owner here today.
Right, he hasn't, what I'm saying is he hasn't had any vehicles towed off of the property.
Well, because I've been candidly too generous with the tenants.
Right, and this is, I think, the one of the problematic areas. As a landlord, it is really your due diligence, right, to make sure that your tenants are complying with city ordinances, that they're being respectful and mindful to the community and their neighbors. Now, it's not your job, right, to really micromanage the business, but I think being a good tenant it works hand in hand. So if they're not being good tenants, then it really frowns upon you as the property owner, because you're the ones who are getting the violations, having to come before the council, having going to municipal court. So it gives you more hardship when your tenants aren't being cooperative in the community. So that's where I kind of put it back on your lap.
And I appreciate that. And I just had one item, and that is that I was not aware of some of the things that this gentleman pointed out about behavior in the parking lot. And I do have provisions in my leases that prohibit that activity. And if it's brought to my attention within a day, the next business day, we'll send a notice of violation out. And we have the right to do that. And if we get a series of notice of violations, we have the right to evict.
And this is kind of a little off topic and not to string it out, but I believe that property also had an incident where there was illegal clipping of dog ears at one point. That was public.
I was not aware of that either.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, there was an incident there. So again, you not being in, I get it, you have a lot of property and a lot of things going on in multiple cities, but it affects the people in our community.
Well, I would tell you, though, notwithstanding all the other activity, we do have a very good system set up for getting complaints and dealing with them effectively. And maybe the beginning should be for us to meet and for me to give you some of those numbers and contact information and hear some of those concerns and let you know that we'll respond to them. I mean, candidly, personally, I don't always respond to them, but they get responded to very quickly, and I'm happy to meet with you afterwards tonight, even if you'd like, and go over that.
Thank you, sir. With that being said, public comment is now closed, and I'm going to leave it up to the council for a vote. Madam Clerk, may we have a roll call vote on this ordinance, please?
Do we have a motion on the floor?
No, we don't have one. Okay.
I'll make a motion, based on Mr. Savage. I'm going to trust that he's going to do what he says, and I also value Mr. Fazioli's, our planning director's input. So I'm going to make a motion that this zone change passes as written.
From a C3 to a C4?
From a C3 to C4, correct.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor right now for passage of this ordinance by Councilman Morado. Would anyone like to second that motion?
Second.
We have a second by Councilman Rodriguez. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Nay, I'd really like to table it for 3 December, but I'm voting nay on the motion.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Nay, because I think we should have some effort shown prior to approving this in good faith so that the community knows that they're going to be good landowners and tenants.
Council Vice President Rodriguez.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you.
Just, Mr. President, I would encourage the residents to please get your complaints in if they continue. I offer to myself directly, and I will be right out there, but certainly there are other city department heads and Councilman Brito and Councilwoman Souza's at your ward, Ward 2, and Thorn Avenue is important to us, so we will stay on top of this, and if I have anything to do with it.
And can you give your contact information to the city clerk, please? Thank you. So, thank you. Thank you. So we can proceed. What we're going to do at this point in time, we're going to bypass all the other items on the city council agenda, and we are going to have now our joint session with the city council and school committee. And
Mr. President, if I could just ask one question. It was my understanding that we were to focus on city and school business as part of a joint meeting. There seems to be a lot of city business on here. I thought we had kind of made the agreement that we were going to kind of hold that to...
And we can, proceeding forward, we can go right into
Yeah, I agree, Councilman, and if we don't have time for the other stuff, I have no problem in putting it off to the next meeting. The intent was to have the workshop with the school committee tonight.
So at this point in time, we'd like to welcome the school committee. Sometimes you don't plan these events to turn out the way they do, but unfortunately, as you all know and experience, that sometimes the simplest thing turns out to be the longest things here. Madam Clerk, can you just give us a brief introduction with the joint meeting that we have?
Excuse me, Mr. President, before you begin this meeting, the school committee has to formally convene into their session, so I would ask them to, Chairman, to call the roll of your committee and convene your session.
Please respond with your presence. Vice Chair Jessica Beauchene. Here. School Committeeman at Large Joe Montero.
Here.
From Ward 2, Anthony Ferreira.
Here.
And I'm here from Ward 1. From Ward 3, Karen Oliveira.
Here.
Thank you. We have already had the Pledge of Allegiance, and I want to thank the City Council for holding this meeting, because I think it's very important to move forward. And with Mr. President, your approval, will move forward into the items that we have. And the first item we have is the school department access to City Hall facilities going forward. As recently as a week ago, we received an informal notification that our access to City Hall facilities has changed. Now, we have had our Executive Secretary Sharon Corsi check on this going forward, and we have scheduled some meetings in the next month and for next year, our school committee meetings. And at this point, I do not see a problem. I would ask Sharon if you, at this point, you haven't seen any issues with the access?
I don't have access to reserve rooms.
Okay, Sharon, would you mind coming to the, or using the microphone, please?
To the chair.
No, she doesn't. There's a chair there.
Mr. Montero?
Yeah, so just to kind of put it in context without putting it all on Sharon, essentially the process, as many of us know, to reserve rooms in the building, the administrative folks had access to a shared calendar, and they would essentially book a room that was listed as available. I guess there was a change in the software of some sort, and that process is no longer as independent as it previously was. So at this point, Ms. Corsi now goes to someone and basically requests to be put on the calendar, but she has no visibility, which I'll let her go into a little bit further, but I'm sure you can understand if we're trying to schedule something and we say, let us know what dates are available, she actually has no visibility to that.
So there were about 6 to 10 people in the building who had access to the computer program, who could log on to the computer program and reserve rooms, and that does not exist, and that's why that is on the agenda.
And my understanding was that it just, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, that I went through the city clerk, and either the city clerk made those arrangements in the past, or...
No, it was a computer program that Sharon could go on, she could access it from her desk and reserve rooms and council chambers. That no longer exists, so we were looking for clarity on this. And Sharon, I think we've done some talking here, but do you want to add anything at this point?
So there's a reservation calendar that we use. There's several people in the school department that are able to reserve locations for certain meetings. But something changed with the city and their software, and we no longer have access to that. So I cannot look at the calendar. I don't know what's available anymore. So I've been going through Marlene Davis in the mayor's office, and she's been willing to, help and reserve some rooms for me at this point.
So my question is, for clarity, is that the correct process? Is that what we are supposed to follow? Or is there another process that we are not aware of?
Again, personally, I'm not aware of this. In the past, I've always went through the clerk's office.
Understand.
And I asked the clerk whether or not a conference room or otherwise, or the chambers was available, and I was notified at that point in time of one or the other. I don't know of any other changes, to be quite frank with you. The mayor's here.
Yeah.
Is he?
Thank you, members of the council, school committee.
Thank you, Mayor.
We did update to a different software. I think we're using Windows 365 now, which may have affected the accessibility. But I will allow our IT professional to explain what can be done, if anything, to remedy the situation. They have been going through the person in my office currently to schedule any dates to make sure there's no conflicts or any problems like that.
We just want to make sure we know what the procedure is going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, hopefully I can offer a little clarification, and if anything, actually offer the opportunity to build on that. So essentially, the school and the city are two separate domains. After our deconsolidation, effectively, there is not one large network that connects the school department and the city. Now, our mail client had been on site previously. We've just changed to Office 365, so it's a cloud-based app. So that break really between the city and the school domain is no longer there. So we don't have user accounts, so to speak, that are both on the city and the school side. That's where they had gained access in the past. These systems are completely independent of one another, but I see no reason why we couldn't set up. I know we're based on just, you're stepping down to the office, you're discussing with Marlene where it's at. I understand that public visibility is an issue. It is a private calendar that's scheduled within the organization. It's not something that necessarily the public have access to. We do have calendars that they can book in that sense. So we can discuss, of course, I can work with Ben, your IT director on that side as well, too, and we can try to come to something. But I know that the previous process may not be able to continue as such, what you were used to.
So you can work it out where they could have access to it one way or the other?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
It's an account within our organization that they would have access to. Okay. I just have to make sure there's a break between, because we are two technical different organizations.
Is that satisfying to?
And I would think that we would probably be able to work with our city clerk, so both clerks would work together, since our city clerk has control of and knows when people are going into meetings and when rooms are available.
Okay.
Sharon shaking her head there. Can we hear from
I'm no
you?
longer in this building, so I'm in another facility.
Right.
So I would need to access it from where I am.
So I like. I'm sorry. I like to ask. And sometimes, I'm back to basics, old school guy. I mean, back in the day when the city was bigger, had more employees, there was someone in the building, in the office, a secretary, usually to the manager or the superintendent, that had something called a calendar, clipboard calendar. And you call that person and you say, we would like to use room 305 for a meeting for X, Y, Z. The person looks at the calendar and says, it's free, put you in, you're booked. Or it's not booked. And now we're talking about accessing through computers. We have the superintendent now, and the administrative assistant is not here to do that. And other people, are we making this more complicated? Shouldn't this have been a 20-minute discussion in City Hall between city and school?
I agree with you 100%, Councilman, and the fact that this is actually a docketed item is surprising to me. I thought maybe we could have had a conversation outside of this forum, but since it's here, we're happy to try to provide a login for the school department so they can log in. It's a cloud-based, it's a new service, cloud-based. So we'll talk to our IT. We'll create a login account for somebody at the school department that they can share with other members of the team on the school side, and then they can schedule those type of things. Problem solved.
There we go.
And that would be fine, as long as Sharon she'll be the contact person.
Absolutely.
And she'll continue to schedule from her desk then.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Next, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is discussion, I believe we're still on the school agenda.
Disbursement.
Number 2.
The next item is the disbursement of the $6.5 million, which was identified by the auditor I don't think the audit report is finalized yet. Is it out yet or no? No, it's not. And I think we have some questions and some concerns. Mr. Ferreira, would you like to kick this off?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have no concerns. I have no questions. We received a letter from our legal team this afternoon, and I think it's been discussed over the last month and a half that the $6.5 million belongs to the school department. I haven't heard one person on any side or any resident say otherwise, so that's just confusing to me that we're at this level once again, but we'll keep going. So as far as I'm concerned, if there's no disagreement with the $6.5 million, I would like to suggest that we don't put a burden on the city of about $80,000 or $90,000 if we received a lump sum of money. So I would like to discuss at our next meeting, or if we could do it now, to disperse this over a 4-year period at about $1.5 million plus interest going forwards based on the 6.5, and we'll forego the interest that was accrued over the last couple of years. And if there's no problem with that, or if anybody wants to add to it, it's just another one of these things that I just don't understand. I have not talked to anybody or heard anybody that has an issue with this money, and now I got to flip to a taxpayer. I don't think anybody sitting up here would ever want to put a burden on the city to receive this chunk of money, because out of this chunk of money, we have to make sure it's allocated. I'm going to stay adamant that the $6 million get allocated towards Martin Middle School remodel, which is going to cost the taxpayers about $40 million over the next 4 or 5 years, which that falls on our realm. But this money cannot be resorted back to the school department and just spent randomly going forwards. It was new. I'm not going to say it was new money, but it was money that was, as far as I'm concerned, was not allocated for anything up into about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago. So as far as I'm concerned, this money should be sent back to us at about $1.5 million over the next 4 years with interest, and that's the only, if we make a motion on it, whatever we do.
This isn't on for a vote this evening.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Is that in a form of a motion?
Yes.
For the school committee.
Okay.
Only for the school committee.
Okay. So hold on, because we were on for discussion, disbursement of the 6.5. Okay. So we're tackling 2 issues here right now. We're tackling the discussion and the action all in one. So proceeding this, we don't need to go any further.
Correct. I mean, we'll have other issues, I'm sure, to talk about, but is that in the form of a motion?
Yes, and the interest going forward would be 3%, Mr. Chairman. I make that a motion.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
Is there any discussion on the council side at all? Or?
Certainly, but this is just the school committee portion.
Let me clarify. This is just the school committee's agenda. They don't have control of this money at this moment.
Right.
Okay.
This is only a recommendation from the school committee that they are requesting that the city give this over to them at $1.5 million a year at a 3% interest rate. It is not on, over 4 years. It is not on the council agenda. The council cannot vote on it. This is just a recommendation, basically, from the school committee. At a later date, you can take the recommendation and do as you please with it. At this point, however, the money remains in the city's coffers of the due to, due from account, as it was explained ad nauseum at the last meeting. So, but this is just, I guess, the sense of the school committee as how they would like this money paid back to them over the next 4 years.
So for clarification, is there going to be a discussion amongst the council and school committee tonight, or?
Yes.
When it's presented to council.
Right.
So tonight is strictly for the school committee.
This is what, but excuse me, I'm sorry, Chairman, but certainly, Councilman, if you'd like to weigh in on this motion right now, this is a joint meeting. This is a joint meeting. You're allowed to take your vote because you noticed it as a vote, but this is under discussion. So I would say that because it's a joint meeting and we have all members of the school committee and city council here, Councilman, you are certainly, you can weigh in on this at this point if you'd like to. Thank you very much. I agree with that, too. I would just like to get a second on that motion from the school committee. Is Is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chairman, just before we make a second, I do think it's appropriate to, and not unusual to have more discussion prior to that and for clarification. As most of you know, I did ask for the legal because I was concerned as to whether or not we even had the authority, because these monies include state and federal funds. I didn't know if we had the authority to give the council or the city approval to hold it and use it for other means until we took possession of it. And as Mr. Ferrara said, we did receive confirmation from our legal that says that we do have that ability, which is, I think, as a taxpayer as well, is the preferred means because it lessens the burden. My hesitation on seconding the motion is not, I'm not opposed to the concept, because I think we all agree in doing it in pieces, but I feel like the dollar amounts might be a little random. In other words, what I anticipated was maybe leaving here with a plan for both our finance director, Mr. Moore, superintendent, basically identifying some projects, some needs, and then putting a timeline to that, so that I think this is so public at this point, as it should be. And, my intention was to basically reassure all stakeholders that the money is going to be tended to with transparency and just very clearly and directly. So, again, just to say, to back up a motion of 1.5 a year, where, we may say, we could use 2, or maybe we need 1.8 in a year, a motion would basically,
tie your hands.
Yeah. So a motion like that defined without having something.
Again, that's strictly a recommendation or a request.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I think it's appropriate to have some conversation. I think the basis of that motion is not way off. I don't know that we've reached a point, in my opinion, where we can just lock in on a dollar amount each year and call it a day.
I would just, if I may, Jim, the one question I would have, it's not a question of whether or not the 6.5, we all know where the 6.5 belongs to the school department. My question would be, where did the 3% come from?
The interest rate, I think, is 3% because if legally we could go after the interest that occurred over the years based on the conversation with our legal team. We don't want to get into that. So we were more or less guided to say that just let that forgo, so there's not even a discussion on it per se. Going forwards, the city has been and will continue earning interest on that at the market rate at 3% now is not an issue. We're going to give up in the realm of $500,000 to $600,000, which that's not the issue. We all pay taxes here, but at the end of the day, this issue just has to be put aside. If we want to discuss the interest rate at 3% or 2%, then that would be, it's still open to discussion. But at some point, this has to get put aside, and we have to move on with running the rest of the city, and we have to continue running the school department. I mean, there's never been an argue over the money for the last 2.5 months maybe. How we got to this point and where we are now, I respect it, but I get a little confused because nobody's arguing the sum of money. It's just a point, and I don't think anybody would argue the sum that nobody up here, I think, would sit here and say, take it all at one lump sum and put a burden on the city. So I think we're all in agreement of that. I'm under the belief that the discussion that we had about 2.5 months ago, that we were already planning to do window projects at Martin, we were planning to do vestibule projects. This new money word came up at a morning meeting, so we can always have an argument and a discussion what we want to do with this money, but up until 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, this money miraculously didn't appear, so we had no, going forwards, we had no plan to put this money into use. I just say at this point now, when we know we already started the ball rolling slow for Martin, what better use would it be to say, let's put this $6 million towards that at 54.5 or 60%, we turn it into $9.5 million, $9.25 million. Once again, it's just, that's how this money all accrued by us investing it, getting reimbursement, keep that ball rolling. So if I think as far as I'm concerned, how we spend it is really a school department discussion. If we want to discuss that we're not entitled to the money, or the interest might be too high over 4 years, I'm fully open for that discussion. But to sit here and have a discussion with the city council, what we're going to spend our money on, if somebody can clarify.
I don't think that was ever a point. The point of this meeting tonight was to, figure out a plan. We already beat to death how we got to this point. The point now is how do we move forward? And, and we're all in agreement that 6.5 belongs to school department. What we haven't discussed, which is the purpose of this meeting, is how we're going to pay the 6.5. And at the end of the day, the 6.5, that's still taxpayers' money. There's not a separate group of taxpayers just contributing to the school. No. So at the end of the day, we have to, work through this in a way that's fair for everyone, and that, we're not taking out loans and whatever else to pay those interests on the 6.5. So I do like your idea of the over a 4-year term. However, I would rather see that extended to at least a 5, and I don't know where the 3% interest rate came from. It's still city money regardless. If it belonged to school at one point, if it belonged here, it's still city money. It's still taxpayer dollars. So I don't understand how we can pay a 3% or 2 or any percentage of interest.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and to Mr. Morato's point, the reason that I asked for that is through the presentation that we received via the auditor and presentations that Malcolm has given us in the past, it became clear to me at least that $6.5 million is essentially an accounting liability that the city owes the school department. I think we all were nodding our heads in that. It does not represent in any way, shape, or form an additional $6.5 million to any school budget, right? So whether the council were to authorize the transfer of that $6.5 million from the city to the school department in our next meeting, or whether we are to do it over a period of years, that's not going to change any budget allocation that's provided to the school department. I just want to make sure that that's clear. So any discussion about what the school department is going to allocate that money for, or projects that are kind of in the queue, I think is completely separate from this discussion. Really, the only thing that in asking for it to be on the docket, the thing that I wanted to get to was how quickly do the school committee and the city council want to reduce that balance to zero? That's where I was focused. So it sounds like we're talking about a number of years here. I think we've heard what the school committee would, well, I mean, you guys, I guess I have to finish a vote. But I think we've heard what, you're looking for. Certainly, I think the council is ready to take that under consideration and take whatever action we think is best.
Thank you, Mr. Cahoon. No, you well said. And that's what we're doing now. We're discussing what the plan is going to be on this money. And you've got to start somewhere with this discussion, and this was our starting point.
Well, Mr. Chairman, excuse me. I think I concur with Councilman Cahoon. That was the reason for tonight. We don't have the audit report, but we had the auditor in person at that podium who explained, as was said ad nauseum, what the $6.5 million represents. So that's not in question anymore. And you can take a vote. It's non-binding. It isn't going to mean anything. It's like an opinion poll of the school committee. What I think should happen is the professionals that run the two departments. I thought from tonight, we'd all have some ideas on the table, and the two finance officers, superintendent, the mayor, would sit in a room and decide how they're going to do it. If they're going to build a vestibule at Riverside Middle School and you need X amount of dollars, okay, here's the check. You know, now I'm hearing it's all for Martin Middle School. I don't know, I guess that's a school department decision, but it isn't for us to decide that. So I think we need the day-to-day professionals. We're giving you this decision. We're telling you through the auditor, yes, it's school department funds. It's owed to the school department from the city council. But I don't like the idea of adding on top of the taxpayers an interest charge. It's not their fault that this happened, and why are we charging ourselves interest?
I don't think Mr. Ferrer was talking about that. I think what he was talking, and I'm not speaking for him, and I may be off guard, but I think the interest was the fact of the money is sitting in an interest-bearing account right now. So what he was saying is he would like the interest that it is accruing. The $6.5 million is sitting in an interest-bearing account. So he was saying he would like the interest that it is accruing. So if the interest it is in right now, if it's gaining, if the 6.5 is in an interest-bearing account and it is in a low interest-bearing account, see, I had a great conversation with a man in the audience right now, which I think he should come up because he did explain this to me a lot better than the auditors did, because they gave me the world around, because you watched me sit there for all those meetings. You watched my face, you saw me sit there, you saw me almost in tears, because you knew exactly what I was thinking about. So I went to the man that I knew I could get the answers from to find out if this money, where it's been, and he explained it to me perfectly. So I knew that this money has been around, and it might not have all been taxpayers' money. It could have come from the state. It could have come from the federal government.
Which is indirect.
Correct. Oh, of course it is. But it could have. But I think that the money, when he says interest, it's because it's sitting in an interest-bearing account. So at the low interest point of 1%, $100,000 was collected this year. If it sits in an okay interest account, it's collecting a little more. So I think that's where, when he's saying an interest account. So that's when he's saying at a 3% interest rate. I don't think he's going to be charging interest, because that would be absolutely asinine.
So if I may, and I think...
And Joe, can I just, and Bob, just...
by the way, was I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay.
And where I came up with the 4 years was because I did exactly what you said, Bob. In other words, Rob, what we did was we met with Malcolm. He was on board for 4 years. We met with our finance director and stuff. We were at the 3 to 4, so I just made my motion to go along with the city side at 4, and we were on the fence at 3 to 4, and I choose to go 4 across the board. So if we want to bring up whoever's here and we can spend another 3 hours on this, I'm game for this. I don't have a problem with it, but I just didn't pull these numbers out of a hat. It was based on the school department was looking for 3, going back and forth with 4. I met with Malcolm. Malcolm was on board with 4. So I choose to hopefully avoid any hard feelings or anything to go across the board with 4. If somebody wants to entertain 5, I feel confident in 4 based on Martin, and just to explain where that came from, and every month we have a facilities meeting. We discuss putting the vestibules in the windows at Martin and other schools 2, possibly 3 months before this money discussion was even brought up. We went down to Martin to actually visibly see the windows and visibly see where we're going to put the vestibules, and that's when it came to our attention that this $6.5 million was new money. So that what I'm saying is I don't want to see this money being spent on projects that already had money allocated. So if I'm wrong for that, I'll take my motion back. I'm just trying to find a way so we all can monitor this $6.5 million going forwards, and I just think right now, our sprinkler systems are probably 100% done, which are $1 million projects. Our roofs are in excellent condition. We just got done with 2 of them, 3 more last year. So going forwards, we really don't see big $1 million projects except Martin, and that could come in with a price tag in the range of $40 million. That's the only reason that I really want to stay going forwards, to keep this chunk of money as a good starting point to go there. That's how I arrived at decisions that I made that motion based on.
And that's why, to earlier what I said was that I agreed with the idea of having a set amount, and a couple reasons for that, and Councilman Roderick's, if we went by piece, right, project by project, there's no way that your finance director can budget for that in advance because there's no way to know what project we would have lined up. So you do want to have a fixed amount. But I do want to speak, and if I'm speaking out of turn, please, someone correct me, but I have watched along listening to Mr. Moore explain about the use of the 6.5 to date with, in lieu of TANs. So that tells me that the 6.5 has not been sitting in an interest-bearing account. It's actually been paying bills for the city. So I don't think that we, and again, I'll stand corrected if I'm misunderstanding that, but as I listened to him, that the money was not sitting and accruing interest. So if we were to attribute an interest rate to that and expect that back, then it would be an increased burden on the city, because it's not funds that are sitting in that account along with that 6.5 base, because that's not how it's been active. But again, I'll go back to, and I was not privy to the conversation with Mr. Moore or our folks on agreeing to 4 or 5 year term, and I'll defer to the city. And as Councilman Roderick said, having Mr. Moore and Mr. Enos with superintendent and the mayor come back to us with a plan, I'm good with that. I think.
And if I'm not mistaken, when the auditor was here with his presentation, he did say the money was there on paper and paper alone.
Right.
So I don't know what interest is actually there, but the money is there on paper.
You can ask Malcolm. He told me. I asked him.
Well, I'm just going according to what the auditor said, and he said that publicly here. I'm not saying it isn't or it is. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying what the auditor had said, that it's the to and from, is that, it's the juggling the money.
I'm not making it up. I wouldn't make something like that.
I'm not questioning whether or not you did. I'm just telling you what the auditor said. Any other further discussion?
Well, I think we're here, and we want the superintendent to speak, but we're here to start the discussion, and I think that's what we're doing. And we're headed in a direction, whether Mr. Ferrer's motion gets seconded or whatever, again, this is just the beginning of the discussion. Superintendent Crowley?
Yes, Mr. Ferrera did come in, and he talked to Mr. Enos and myself, and he had come, I think, from the mayor's office at that time, if I'm correct, Mr. Ferrera.
Yes.
Right. And so he said, well, what do you think? How many years? Because we both agree, again, we don't want to hurt the city in any way with the transfer of this money. So Craig and I said 3 years, maybe 3 over the course of 3 years. He said, well, the city thinks 4 years. We don't care if it's 4 years. And Mr. Ferrer is right. We could put it into our capital improvement line item. If we came up with a number for each one of these 4 years, as Mr. Montero said, then that would go right into our capital improvement line item. And the biggest project on our capital improvement line item after the things we do this year is the Martin Middle School project.
And I think that that's a wonderful idea. I think previously when we started these discussions coming about knowing that this money was here and available for the school department. I think the consensus is that this would go back into capital funds, and it makes sense that when you that we would allocate the money, like you said, depending on what that dollar amount is every year, and it lends for transparency. So we know what's in the account. We know what projects have to be approved through the school committee that are going to be allocating, and then the school committee does a wonderful job with their finance department in keeping up to date with monthly finances. So that lends for accountability for the school committee to see. So we allocated $1.625 yearly into the capital budget from the city side this year. What are the projects moving forward? And then, obviously, the school department can certainly let the city know how they're making out like they typically do, versus saying, well, we're going to get the money, where's the money going, where are we going to allocate it? You put it in those funds, and then as those projects come up, then you're reallocating that money, and it's in a transparent way for the school committee, for the council, for the public, and all that are involved stakeholders. So I agree with that, and I'm comfortable moving forward with those recommendations. Again, that percentage kind of threw me off. Certainly, that's something to look into with Malcolm to see if it is in, again, from my understanding, it was not all the funds that are in the city are primarily operational funds, and we have to TANs out for that on a yearly basis, and then pay back the TANs loans per the interest. So I'm not sure, again, and it's just not knowing. So I'd have to find out more information about that before coming up with a decision. Because again, I don't think, though we were holding it, I don't think anybody should be penalized for having that money there, because it is going to be allocated to where it needs to be now that we are aware of it being here and who it belongs to.
Can I, through both chairs, can I call Mr. Luber up? I have a couple of questions for him, if that's possible.
While we're waiting for Mr. Luber to come up, this is public money. As everyone has said, this is taxpayers' dollars. This is money that belongs to the taxpayers, and that's why we're having a public discussion about it. And I think that's the main reason that we're here. Mr. Luber.
If I may, I'm sorry, just only because I know that the council does reach a different audience than the school committee, and I just feel it important for people to understand, when they hear about surplus on the school side, right, the initial is, I thought you needed money, And most of you here at the dais have heard me say it, but it bears repeating. It's illegal for us to run a deficit, so we have to run a surplus every year. Okay, so now the tracking of that surplus over the years was foggy and again, we don't need to throw stones, but that's how we accrued the surplus. But I can tell you that, as Mr. Ferrera referenced, quite a few projects that are going on, there is no shortage of capital improvement needs that have been identified and cost estimated out. And since those estimations, I'm sure those estimates are quite a bit larger, but there's definitely a need for those funds, and will continue to be so. But I just want to make that clear that each surplus that we have each year is so that we are not in violation of the law, because the school department, unlike the municipality, cannot run a deficit.
And there's a return on that investment as well through RIDE.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so that's the other thing we mentioned here, that there's a return.
You look at our, and that's where I know Malcolm has it in here, reference, $10 million in RIDE approved projects, that when RIDE approves a project, that means that we are guaranteed that 54% reimbursement on those dollars. So our capital improvement dollars multiply, and when we reinvest that reimbursement dollar, it's grown again. So I'm sorry, Mr. Luber, I appreciate your patience.
It's okay. I got a question for Mr. Luber.
Mr. Luber. Opening statement first.
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to get rid of one misconception. The auditors did not discover the $6.5 million. They did not find the $6.5 million. They did not uncover it. They did not reveal it. The city has $6.5 million on their books as an IOU to the school. The school has on their books that the city owes them $6.5 million. Both of these books were presented to the auditor. The auditor looked at it, did some audit work, and said, "You're right. City owes the school $6.5 million, and the school is owed by the city $6.5 million. So you can't discover, reveal anything that's been given to you. So that's one thing I just want to get that misconception out. It's like the auditor said, "Hey, we got $6.5 million here. I found it. Good, it should pay me more." So basically, both the city and the school's books show the $6.5 million, and the mere fact that the city says it owes the school $6.5 million means the school doesn't have the money. The city has it. So that's one thing. Second thing is the money does exist in the city's bank account for part of the year. Because part of the year, the city is flush with money. Once all the taxes come in June, May, July, the city has a lot of money. So that $6.5 million does exist in the city's bank account. But as we all know, because the tax year and the fiscal year is not synchronized, the city runs out of money in January. So that $6.5 million kind of delays when it runs out because the city uses it for operations during that time. And when they borrow money, they borrow it later. They don't have to pay interest as long. And they don't have to pay interest on having to borrow that $6.5 million because they used it for operations. So you're both kind of right. The city has it in their account for part of the year. And for the other part of the year, they don't have to borrow as much. They don't have to borrow it for as long. And that's, for a period from probably February to the end of June. So we talked about those two.
So your opinion, what would it mean for the city if the city paid a lump sum of 6.5?
That's a good question. It would mean that the city would forego the interest for the period where it's flush with cash. And interest rates right now are about 2%, so let's use that. So it would lose 2% from July through January or February, and it would have to pay more interest from February to July. So if their interest rate on debt is 2%, and it could be, it's probably less, or it could be a little more. So the city would lose interest and have to pay more interest if it gave the 6.5 all at once.
So from a responsible position, if the city was to give this out in increments of whatever years, it would be more beneficial to the city, correct?
It would be more beneficial to the city, and the city would borrow less, pay less interest, and generate more interest. However, none of this is easy, as you guys know. What Mr. Ferraro said is that, let's say the 6.5 was in the school department all at once, and they invested it and generated their own interest. And let's say it's $200,000 that they generated. Let's say that they dedicated that interest to capital. They could turn that $200,000 into over $400,000. How? That $200,000 gets a reimbursement of $108,000. So all of a sudden, for a $200,000 project, you got reimbursed $108,000. Then you can buy something else. Do some other construction. For $108,000, you get 54 back, or 56, or 57. So if the school did dedicate that money on interest to capital, I think in the end, the taxpayers would probably benefit Early on, the city would have to pay more in taxes, or the taxpayers. But if the school used that interest that they could generate for capital, then that's a hell of a return. You can't get that return anywhere. So I would say, as soon as possible, if the school gets the money and dedicated the interest earned in that money to capital, then it would benefit the city in the long run.
So my next question will be, you've heard 3 years, 4 years. I'm hearing a lump sum, right?
Yeah.
That could be also a benefit, which means that if the lump sum was transferred over to the school, there would be more borrowing. You have to make up the 6.5 to borrow from the TANs.
Yeah.
The 6.5, first question is, what would that translate into TANs? Because we need that, now we need to fill in that gap. That 6.5 is being used right now to fill in that gap, but what would that translate into?
Well, with TANs and foregone interest, it probably would be in the neighborhood of, a couple $100,000 probably.
So would
the city would lose.
Would it be beneficial for the city, because we have to pay that interest that's accrued, correct? Either way?
Right.
Okay. So would it be more beneficial to pay that 6.5, cut our losses basically? Or would it be more beneficial?
Not initially, but once the school gets the money, invests it, gets interest, has a capital project, gets reimbursed from the state, which is a year later. Like I say, over the long run, the school benefit, the city and the school benefit, because you're all one. The city and the school would benefit by the school having the money and investing it. In a short run, it would hit the city, and the taxpayers would have to.
Did I have just one more question?
Would have to pony up.
Just a clarification on that, though. So when the benefit to the school and the city would essentially be tackling more capital projects at a faster pace because that money would be available. Operationally, from a budgetary standpoint, it changes nothing, but like I said, that list of capital projects that exist and is waiting to get done, to your point, having that money up front would basically allow the school department and essentially, the city would benefit as having buildings in better condition at a faster pace.
This is all in theory.
Right, no, but
let's say that the school got $6.5 million and used the money for operations, the interest earned for operations. Then there wouldn't be an extra benefit. It almost has to be used for capital.
Right, but I'm just saying, as far as from, because everyone speaks, and rightfully so, from a taxpayer's standpoint. So, and I just want to, I don't want to be, and I know it's not your intention to be misleading, but we have to, not get fuzzy on that. Operationally, the city and school budgets don't change. What that money up front would do is it would attack that capital need faster with the reimbursement money being reinvested. So that's where the improvement goes.
But that's only if the school department decides to spend it on capital. Right. The school's getting an allocation of, let's call it $50 million from the city in FY20, right?
Yep.
If the school gets $6.5 million of that $50 million right now and decides to put that into capital, right, by changing their own budget, right, that doesn't mean they're going to get $56.5 million over the course of FY20. They're going to get $50 million.
Right.
So, to Paul's point, right, you get an immediate return if you decide to do that with it, but you're going to have to take it out of something else.
Right. The city would have $200,000 less. They would have to go out to the taxpayer to get it. The school would have $200,000 more on their books, and if they said, okay, we're having $200,000 more, we need $200,000 less, we're going to ask $200,000 less from the city, it's a break even.
So would that gap be able to be closed on the city side with capital improvements, that budget?
I
No? Did it be used for that?
Well, like I said, initially, the city loses $200,000.
So I have my final question, Mr. Luba. You've been here for a long time. You've been advising the city for a long time.
6 years.
In your opinion, what do you think is the most financial plan going forward? And you've heard this discussion going back.
I'm a believer that the school's money should be at the school. I advocated for the state money and the federal money going immediately to the school, and that's what happens. It's too messy otherwise. The $6.5 million, most of it was generated from surplus, from school surplus. The state money and then the federal money is almost immediately going to the school now. I think it would probably be most prudent if you do it over 3-4 years, whatever. Just transfer it over. But remember, if you're going to charge the city interest, the city might as well give it to you all at once, right? Because the city, the only benefit of having the $6.5 million is that they have to borrow less, and that they're generating, the times they're flush with cash, they're actually generating some money. So if you're going to charge them, then just move it over. It doesn't really matter to the city. It's only that, they're paying less interest, and they're investing when they're flush with cash to get interest. So...
Are you saying that because it's in an interest-bearing account for the...
For half the year.
I just need to say that because people up here are questioning whether or not I was right on that.
When the city is flush with cash, what they're not spending is in an interest-bearing account.
It's an account. All of it. Thank you.
Right.
All of the city's money.
But the city needs cans, of course they're using it for operation.
We want it to be. That's the point. We want the money. That's exactly what we want.
Right. So, it's... I think, the plan to do it over 3-4 years, the interest rate on if you're going to charge the city interest, might as well give them the whole $6.5 million, because...
That's all we're saying. We're not questioning you.
Oh,
We're saying what he just said.
Well, that's why I talked to the man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you say some people,
Your understanding was it wasn't.
Well, because when you're talking about applying a 3% annual interest to something that, even with my understanding, it falls in the middle. It's not an annual interest. Only for less than half of the year it's accruing interest.
Right.
So even at that calculation, between your understanding and my understanding, the reality falls somewhere in the middle.
But like he said tonight, and like you said to me a couple weeks ago, it makes a lot of sense. If you were to take the money now, you can see where, if we invested it and then we were to take the interest on it and invested that, you're talking, we could do some really good things. But without hurting the city, is it possible? That's the question.
Well, in theory, yes.
That's the question.
In theory, yes, but if...
I know.
If you got the $6.5 million and either you didn't invest it right, or you invested it and, spent it however else, then the city's losing money and the school, is gaining maybe less. Or if the school, let's say they generated $200,000 on the interest, and they didn't reduce their ask from the city, they just kept the ask the same in the budget year, then the city's losing $200K, the school has $200 extra K, but they're still asking for the same amount from the city, so the city's losing out. So I said, in theory it works, but it has to work in practice for it to be a good thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this one? But I just want to make sure the auditors didn't discover it, they didn't reveal it, they didn't find it.
Money's in the
Very nice dress. Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed. What if it's dispersed as needed? Would that be?
That's what it's doing now. If the school wants the money, they could have it. If they have a capital project, Mr. Moore will say it. He's going to give it to you. But if it's a $2 million,
that's not a dispute up here.
$2 million.
That's not a dispute. So to go further with this conversation, no one here is disputing that at all. We already know that as council members and school members, we've already had our sidebar conversations, and we've even talked about it publicly as well, that we know that money belongs to the school. Period.
So let's say you decided to divvy it up over 4 years, but the school says, hey, we got a $3 million capital project we need it right away.
But that's up to the school department to decide and not the council. So,
Right, but
and that would be something
gonna
that
get
they
it
could, provided that that's what they decide on. But, you know, that's a whole nother meeting for the school committee.
Right.
Through the chair, I'd like to point out one item that has been neglected in this. Most of the people have been correct. For 6 months, there's no money. For 6 months, it's earning interest. You keep talking about charging the city interest. What you don't understand is that the school, from the state, they get $18 million at the end of 6 months and at the end of 12 months. So if you were getting it monthly, you'd be getting $3 million a month. They're not. So every month, the city is funding the school with that $3 million. So 3, 6, 9, 12. So, you know, if you want to talk about interest, the school owes the city $9 million, $12 million as of April. I mean, it seems a little odd, but they do. So the city's always fronting the school money. The school catches up after the end of 6 months and after the end of 12. But they're borrowing $3 million a month for the first 6 months. You know, so when you talk about you owe me interest, and now I'm going to TANs because I got to borrow because your $18 million doesn't come in, and I'm borrowing $18 million. You know, I could be allocating all of that TAN expense over to you. You know, it's never come up. But, you know, if you're going to sit there and say, well, you owe me this, well, okay, let's be fair then, and we'll figure out what the school owes us.
No, and I agree with you on that, Malcolm. I think we go down a slippery slope if we start considering ourselves lending organizations. And, you know, my preference is, you know, I would rather let the city council track the interest coming into these accounts and apply it to some of the services that I receive as a taxpayer, and then just, you know, let's call this 6.5 and you know, get some resolutions done up within the next few weeks for both the committee and the council to approve based on, again, it sounds like some discussions have happened, but I don't know if the mayor's office and the superintendent's office and their financial folks have come to a firm agreement on what works. But that's just my opinion, and I think, you know, 6.5 is the number, and beyond that, the rest of us are looking for any interest, whether it's, if it stays on the city side, that's going to serve my needs as a resident as well. So I'm not trying to split hairs and drag this out, quite frankly.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I agree with you on that.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. I think unless anybody else on the school committee has anything to say, I think that completes our portion. And again, thank you very much for the meeting.
We do have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, what's the, I mean, we can't be complete because we don't have any action coming away from this day at this time with that. Right, so.
Well, we have an unseconded motion from Mr. Ferreira.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go along with Joel, and we'll forego the interest going forwards on it. I don't have a problem with that. Once again, I'm just glad that we all aren't billing the taxpayers by the hour up here, because this is just a no-brainer. I just don't understand. In other words, I'm sorry I counted my pennies when I was younger, and I still do, but the rumors, a lot of this is just that rumors, and where these interest numbers came. I just didn't pull these out of a hat. So like I said, a lot of what I stated tonight, we had two professionals, our professionals sitting right. The numbers are the numbers. So do I have a problem? Sometimes I like money. I'm not going to deny it. I gave up the money up front, but I'll make my motion that we don't go nowhere with the interest. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem going 4 years, 5 years, because as we all state, it is the taxpayers' money. I just feel more comfortable when you have this sum of money that there's two bodies looking at it, so it's not like a kid running to a candy store and spending it. Right now, we don't got $6 million with the projects shovel-ready, ready to go and stuff like that. That's why I want to spread it out, if we're in agreement, over 4 years. And the only big issue we have, I think, is really focus, that we got to focus as a school committee and keep you guys in touch, is Martin.
So why don't, going forward from here, the school department professional staff makes a recommendation to the school committee, the city administration makes a recommendation to the city council. You mentioned, Committeeman Ferreira, that there's been a meeting with some people. We haven't gotten any information on that yet, and that's fine. So continue that effort, come back to both bodies, make recommendations on a timetable, and we do it.
So if I may, if I may, Mr. Ferreira, I'm going to, with your permission, I'll receive your motion as a motion for the school committee to submit a request for transfer of funds divided equally over 4 years.
Yes.
And for that, and I would second that motion. So that will be a request to the council for disbursement of the 6.5 spread over 4 years. And if that's okay with you, then I would second that motion, that we formalize that request to the council for.
We have a motion with a second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So you have a recommendation now from the school committee.
So we won't table that discussion this evening. However, going forward, we will.
But thanks for the opportunity of having this public discussion also.
And that's a disbursement over 4 years equally.
Correct.
Does that include interest?
No, thank you.
That was withdrawn. Are there any other issues on the school side?
There are issues that Councilman Cahoon brought up. Is that under the school committee agenda or the council? It's a joint meeting, so I don't know if we want to delve into that or have...
So would it be appropriate for the school committee to close their meeting and to participate in the joint session of the council meeting, which is how...
So these items aren't on their docket.
It was noticed both, so you get through your agendas, they can't leave.
Right.
Unless you table your agenda. I do not want them to adjourn until you've gone through your things that you don't want to go through your...
All right, so then would it be most appropriate to move on to the other items to the joint meeting? Okay. So the other items, we have on there twice the discussion of the $6.5 million. I think we can probably put that one to bed and move on to the discussion of the bonding schedule for the high school construction. And to that end, what I sought to gain from our finance department and what they provided us, I think the school committee has this in their packets as well. It's a letter from Mr. Moore to the mayor outlining the city's plan to finance the school over the next several years. I've had a chance to look at this. I think it might be appropriate, Mr. President, if we were to have Malcolm come to the podium and address any questions there might be.
A good day.
So I would like to thank you first, Malcolm, for putting together a memorandum which I thought was pretty clear. I think it highlights what the city's plan is. The way that I understand it is in the sort of immediate term, next year, next 2 years, the city is going to rely mainly on its kind of standard borrowing procedures or standard financing procedures by way of, bands, et cetera, to support the cash flow that's going to be required for the school construction, and that the main thrust, if you will, through the RIHEBBC, I always screw up that acronym, and the infrastructure bonding is to take the preponderance of the school construction money sort of at the end of that period in June of 21. Did I capture that correctly?
We'll end up bonding in June of 2021. So the plan right now is, say, January 1st, we're going to borrow $77 million. And that'll pay for all the construction costs to date, plus for the next 12 months. With the bands, the bond anticipation notes, they're short-term, they come due in a year. So in a year from now, that'll come due. So what we'll do is we'll borrow $130 million, another 53, and then pay off the first 77. And that extra 50 gets you from, say, January 1st to June 30th. And so when that comes due, then we will bond the whole amount, the 172 or whatever the number turns out to be.
And that number is, I think we can characterize that number as fairly fixed, knowing that we got the $16 million up front. We know that the total cost is $189.5. I think it's fair to assume that total number that we're going to need, the balance that we're going to need, is somewhere in the area of $173 million.
Yes. The only little caveat in there is there's $10 million carved out that could go towards the school for other than the high school projects.
So I think I'd like to, Mr. President, if I may, I'd like to give the school committee a chance to ask questions about that. I think that's the piece I don't necessarily understand, is that $10 million.
Can I, I'm sorry, if I may, and Craig, correct me if I'm wrong on this. So the $10 million, when I look at that, I think you're referring to the RIDE-approved project, which have been, again, as I stated earlier in the meeting, right? So we submitted to RIDE a plan district-wide for projects that need to be done. They have to approve those projects and tell us when you do this, you will qualify for your reimbursement. But that is not part of the 189.5 bond for the high school. That bond taken out for the high school is for the high school. That $10 million is basically the RIDE saying that we will reimburse at 54.4, I think is our rate, on $10 million worth of projects. So it has nothing to do
outside of the...
Correct. So that says we're like with our operating budget, with our capital line item, when we contribute towards those projects, if it's a project that is part of that $10 million that RIDE has approved, we already know that we can count on getting that reimbursement because that project has already been approved. But it is not to use a bond to pay for those projects.
That is correct. Yeah. However, the memorandum of agreement said that we're going to get the $16 million up front. So that's how we did the 189 minus the 16 to get to the 172. However, let's say the school does their whole $10 million, and it's a little more than 10, and the 54% comes to $6 million. So they're going to get $6 million back. Well, it's going to reduce that $16 million that I had access to $10 million.
Yeah, but why are we? Yeah, we're talking about $10 million in projects district-wide, but we're talking about the high school projects. The $10 million has nothing to do with the high school.
The pay-go amount. There was a memorandum. Remember the $16 million we're supposed to get? The $16 million could include projects that you mentioned for the $10 million.
So the $10 million, and Joel, if I can piggyback off what you said, because it took me a while to get this when I got on the school committee. The $10 million is basically an authorization from RIDE where they say, if you spend $10 million, we'll reimburse 54% of it. On those projects. If you spend $75 million, we're going to reimburse you 54% of $10 million. It doesn't matter. If you spend $1, we're going to reimburse you 54 cents. Right? That's basically how it works. So that $10 million, while that's probably part of the school's 5-year, 10-year plan, I would imagine, may or may not get allocated in school budgets, depending on what they want to prioritize in capital improvements over the next couple of years. I think that discussion is completely separate and apart of any bonding discussion we're having about the high school construction, which is certainly going to happen and is happening.
But any money spent of that $10 million would reduce that $16 million that's out there.
So if you were to spend $10 million, or some of that $10 million, right, so the $16.5 million, or the $16 million that was provided from the state is not solely for the construction of the high school?
Correct. So the two funding sources where we can get reimbursed for our school construction projects are housing aid or through the PAYGO funding. The PAYGO funding took the place of the school building authority funding. So that is now gone. So the only options we have to get reimbursed of the 54.5 is either through housing aid, which we file once a year, and then we get reimbursed over a cycle of 2 to 3 to 6 years, or we access it through
additional bonding.
The PAYGO funding. Correct.
All right. So, but from the PAYGO funding, right, which is the $16 million, right?
Correct.
Let's draw that line. Of that $16 million, the number that you just gave me in total expenditures to date for the school through tonight's invoices,
which we've already,
would be just north of $13 million.
Correct.
So essentially that $16 million is very close to being spent.
Yeah,
right?
it'll be gone soon.
And it'll be gone, I think we can say safely, it will be gone for the construction, the high school construction project, yes or no?
Yes, if we decide, if the school committee decides that we're going to access funding for a project that we may do.
The windows.
So wouldn't any discussion with regard to $10.1 million, right? And thank you, Malcolm, for bringing this up. Any discussion with regard to $10.1 million of additional projects, be they Martin, Riverside, whatever school, right? That would be pending whatever the school committee decides its budget is going to be on a year-by-year basis. Right? So I don't know off the top of my head what you guys set aside for capital expenditures in FY20, but it's not $10 million, right? And I don't know that if we were to add up that number year on year for the next 3 years, we're going to get anywhere near $10 million. That sounds like a big number to me. Tell me if I'm wrong.
You could be, because Martin's a big number for us, and as Mr. Ferrer has said, Martin's going to be our area of concentration for the next 4 to 5 years, Martin Middle School. So I wouldn't want to make that promise today.
Okay.
But that's our upfront money that
So then,
you used for
in any
paying
part
the bond.
of Malcolm doing long-term planning for financing for school construction over the course of X number of years, understanding that there's a 5- and 10-year plan that's basically mandatory now, based as part of our Stage 2, et cetera, he does have to plan for that $10 million in any kind of bonding scenario, any kind of financing scenario. Okay. All right. So understand that. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you.
And thank you, Craig.
Okay.
Any other further questions for Mr. Moore while he's up here?
The only question I have is, presumably you two guys have talked about this, and you feel like this is a plan that's sufficient to cover the cash flow situation over the course of the project?
Yes, and we've been working with Hilltop, and they're our financial advisors in this matter. So we've sat down and talked about the best way to do this, bands and TANs. We're looking at maybe we could reduce the bands a little bit if we can get the money through the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, but then we have to see when those projects are going to be due. So there's still a few balls in the air on that one, but what we have right now will suffice.
And the plan basically covers the entire expenditure, assuming only a 54.4% reimbursement, right, with the understanding that if it then goes up to the 20% by way of incentives, then that would be money that we would get back.
And the total bond won't change. It'll be 172, or if the school access it'll be a little bit more than that, but let's just use 172. So the total amount of the bond won't change. However, what the city's liability will change depending on whether it's 54 or 74.
74.
And I've been working with 70 as a general number. I think that's what the superintendent had said, that she felt comfortable with. So.
Again, Malcolm, I'd like to say thank you, because I've been kind of waiting to see that plan laid out, so I appreciate this memo. We'll keep tabs on, I'd like you to make sure you remind us of this, when we get into next budget season and, we're looking at that 130 in the next coming fiscal year, that we're paying attention to that by way of TAN, bans and what we're going to be paying back. So.
Great.
Great.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Your items all done?
You all set with your items?
Only other item that we had on the joint meeting had to do with, I was approached by several residents living in the Meadowcrest, now Oldham school area. They had expressed some concerns with regard to the traffic around pickup and drop-off times. Those concerns gel with, what I think we've all heard with regard to a number of schools. Kent Heights is one that, I'm certainly focused on. So what I asked the mayor was if we could have a representative from the police department to maybe talk us through some ideas of things we could do to help fix that situation around some of these schools in the morning. I think there's some discussion as to whether it's an enforcement issue. I think certainly we've had a change in the population at Oldham this year. There are different procedures for dropping off and pickup, so that might be clogging things up. So, Mr. President, if I may, maybe it's appropriate we can ask Officer Norton to come forward, or Sergeant Norton to come up and tell us.
Sergeant Norton? When I was growing up, and I think I mentioned this to you before, we had an officer as well. His name was Officer Friendly.
That's me.
You're the Officer Friendly of the city of East Providence.
That would be me.
So, Mark, I think I think probably none of us is looking for a 100% solution tonight. None of us is looking for, what is the police department going to go out and do tomorrow to help fix this situation? I think what we're looking for is, and Mr. Ferrer expressed some frustration to me the other night, because we've been having this discussion ongoing for several years. What's the best way forward? Is it some combination of, maybe the school department looking at, traffic and drop-off and busing and things like that, combined with enforcement, or is there something immediately that we can do to kind of put folks on notice not to park in illegal parking areas, et cetera? I think that's the kind of guidance that's certainly that I'm looking for.
Well, I think that the school could do their part and put something out to the parents, and we can do our part and enforce the traffic that's there. I know there was a problem early in the year at Orlo Avenue School, and we went over there, and Sergeant Ellenwood and some officers with zero tolerance, and we started ticketing people, and we haven't had an issue over there since. It doesn't help just to move people along. We don't like to ticket people, but it's the only way that we're going to get results. I know we've received 2 emails recently about incidences at Waddington School in the back on Glen Rose. But I know that the student population at Waddington has increased a lot this year, I think, with the students coming over from Meadowcrest. So a lot of the issues, too, is just, too many cars and not enough space. So, but we'll be happy to go out there and enforce. We didn't get calls on the issues at Waddington. We received emails from, I think it was the same person, and it was on, I think we received one on the 12th last week and one on the 13th, but we'll gladly respond. We'll have officers out there monitoring the situation as best we can. In the morning at drop-off time, that's the time where we're transporting prisoners to Providence, to the court. That takes 2 officers. It's a busy time for traffic. We're responding to accidents ourselves. Businesses are opening, alarms are going off, so we have to respond to those as well. But we'll do our best to have officers at the schools where there are problem areas.
So, Councilman, if I can just talk about this a little bit, because I'm going back a couple of years to a few years ago where we had this similar incident at Myron J. Francis. And I don't know, from what I understand, it's a lot better than what it was at the time. However, we made some changes to the flow of the traffic in that particular area, no through certain streets became one-way just within the time span from 7 to 9 a.m., if I'm not mistaken. In addition to that, we were fortunate enough to have an officer whose child attended that school, and that officer assists with the traffic control, and that traffic pattern was designed by the officer at that point in time. It was no longer actually with the police department. However, in working in conjunction with the PTO, the principal, and the police department, we came up with how the roads were going to be navigated in a way that no through, one way, and having an officer out there to get the cars to drop off and moving the cars along. And it worked that I know of. I haven't heard anything since that point in time. Doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have the problem, but I know at that point in time I had a lot of concerns from parents, and I haven't heard any complaint since then. And I'm going back at least 2, possibly 3 years ago.
That's good.
So, and one of the problems that we had were parents were dropping the cars off, parents were dropping their students off right directly in front of the school on one side, and the kids were getting out the car and running across into oncoming traffic. And we avoided that by changing that pattern to make it a one-way. So in an event that a child gets out and runs in front of the car, we didn't have to worry about vehicles coming in the opposite direction and not seeing that child that was coming between two vehicles that were probably essentially parked in the middle of the road to let their kids out.
And by the way, that exact scenario was taking place in a number of places, notably the high school parking lot every morning, which is like bedlam.
So, and I know it did get better. Again, I haven't heard from anyone since that time, but I received a lot of calls and complaints about it, and I worked in conjunction with it was Captain David, actually, because his child was attending the school at the time.
There are one-ways in front of many of the schools.
Yeah. Oldham, unfortunately.
Letty.
Oldham is the school he's talking about, and unfortunately, that is already a one-way. And it's a one-way every which way. And
that's what we did.
But
every which way.
That's the way that this is already becoming a problem. And the unfortunate part about it is, and since this has come up, I've been there. And it is, you have 60 plus kids being dropped off in the morning. Yeah, you've got 90 kids being dropped off. So you have a whole bunch of kids being dropped off in the morning, and all roughly around the same time. And there are a lot of cars, and there are a lot of cars on the street, and it's obvious neighbors are not happy about that, and it's difficult. It is difficult. My concern, and I did bring this up, is if there was to be a need for a fire truck to get through.
Well, at the new Oldham, we did send officers down there. An officer, I just found out about the problem on Thursday. We sent an officer down there for drop-off and dismissal on Friday and again yesterday, and we didn't really notice any problem. I mean, and it already is the one way.
Right.
So there's not a lot you can do. Like I said, it's just a lot of cars and not enough space.
See, there is, all of the pre-K students that are there now have to be dropped off and picked up by a car, because there's no transportation for them. The special ed pre-K, there are buses that drop those students off. So you've got probably 20, 40, 60 cars dropping off and picking up at Oldham that you didn't have before.
And then at Waddington, their population went up. I know I read it's 480. I don't know what it was last year, but...
But actually, that's been very good up until, you're telling me you got 2 emails on that, but that's been very good this year.
from the
What
same
was put
person.
out.
It was on
Now
last-
that it's gotten colder,
It's getting a little
Yeah.
more
It's getting
difficult,
worse.
so we'll monitor that closely again then, Jessica.
Yeah.
But it has been good up to this point.
But we haven't had a problem. Those were the first 3 complaints that we received.
Yeah,
We
I
received
haven't-
one, I think it was October 15th, regarding cars not coming to a complete stop on Brown going through Bright Ridge.
Okay, yeah.
Going to Martin. And last year, we did have problems with cars parking on both sides of the road at Martin, and we went over there and we enforced that, and to my knowledge, we haven't had an issue this year.
It's still the case.
It's still the case,
Yeah.
well.
And that's scary there, because it's kind of someone had mentioned the example, maybe it was you, Mr. Brito, with, children crossing, because they're parked on both sides of Brown, even though, there's a sign on every pole on that school side of the road. And the students are getting out, and then they're crossing back over. And, Brown's like an expressway as it is. And then they're crossing it from in between cars, with cars parked on both sides.
Well, I know last year I monitored it, and cars that were going north would pull over to the left side of the road because the kids would come running up the grass and get into the parent's car.
Yeah.
And it was discussed, I think, last year, too, about possibly making that a one-way on Brown Street. That was an idea that was thrown out there, making that a one-way during drop-off and pickup times.
How about, we're constantly appointing traffic control. Is it good to have perhaps put someone out there for traffic control due to the schedule of the police department and having them, move those cars along?
I know in one of my district's areas, we have those times where between certain hours, no cars are allowed to go by. We do have, fortunately, a traffic controller at White Neck who does a good job at making sure that those cars don't get by. I know last year or the year before, we had a problem at Hennessy where cars were still coming through, so we talked with the police department and tried to get somebody at that post, and we found that that was very helpful. The pattern also changed, too, as to where drop-off was, so they weren't being dropped off any longer at the main door. They were being dropped off behind where the playgrounds were, and then that gave parents the opportunity to park at PS Fields, which was really convenient for the parents. The Brown, the Martin is a little bit problematic, I think, because of that now the teachers no longer have, we're sharing with the kindergarten, the pre-K, so parking is now being shared in the school. I remember going myself when I was at Martin. There were always parents parked on top of the hill, and that's, you ran up and got in the car and sped off. I have noticed, and I do know that the parents are utilizing the Teamsters parking lot to pick up and drop off kids because it's an easy off the lot, and they've been, I think, accommodating and not having complained. At least I haven't heard on the city side. I don't know if the police department have heard any complaints from the Teamsters, but they've been allowing parents to use that as a drop-off and pick-up point for kids, too. So I think maybe a discussion to the parents, maybe the monitor to help redirect some of that would be probably really helpful.
We have our principals sent out a letter concerning that at the beginning of the year, but what we can do is reinforce it. We can ask them to please send out another reinforcing the traffic patterns if we would like to.
And I know Mr. Farrar, I know he's still, and I agree with them, at the end of the day, without a consequence, we're wasting paper because, when we've had, even school personnel, principals, go out, it almost becomes, a confrontation, like a physical confrontation, because, you have no one with really the authority to, to issue any consequences. Without, with the one-way thing, I think works with a lot of the schools. It's been effective for traffic flow. Martin will probably
can't
be
do it at
tough. Brown Street, because you've got that whole neighborhood that is trying to get to work.
Yeah.
And that's just a major throughway. But, anything short of someone ending up with a red tag on their windshield to pay a bill. But, we can't.
Mark, how about if we gave the superintendent and principals the power to ticket cars? Would you like that?
Give her a bullhorn.
There were consequences at Orlo, and that did help out the situation, and we'll be glad to hand out consequences to any drivers at any schools, and all you just got to let us know exactly where the problem issues are. If we don't get the emails or the calls, if you get them, just forward them to us, and we'll go over and do the best we can to enforce them.
It's every school. It's been like this since day one. It's every school in the city, and you just kind of have to go with it issue by issue. I think it has been a little better. I see the situation at Meadowcrest Oldham. That's been better one way. At times, I pick up a grandson at Waddington, and that Glen Rose, it's just, you coined it, too many cars, not enough space. So if you don't get there 45 minutes before dismissal, you park blocks away and you walk, because parents in 2019 and grandparents, they want to see that child. They want to get right there. If they could park in the basketball court, on the basketball court, they would. We're all paranoid about keeping our children safe.
What is that road along the side of Waddington School used for? It's
like an access road.
Is that used for anything?
The buses use that.
Do buses use that?
Yeah.
So I didn't know if the cars could pull down there and just drop off and pull out onto Legion.
No, that's restricted.
I thought about that, though.
Yeah.
Good idea. I agree with that idea.
But then where do the buses go?
Well, if they usually came up front,
Yeah.
they would always drop the kids up front. So if the parents went down that access road, dropped off the kids and pulled out Legion, if it was a one-way, then they could all go through, because according to the emails, cars were backing up on Glen Rose, and the buses were having a hard time coming in there because of the cars. So I was surprised to learn that the buses were coming on Glen Rose. They always went to the front of the school.
You can always make it a one-way for a certain period of time.
So as I said, it's
school hours.
to send the cars down there. They could all go down, wait their turn, drop the child off, and then head out.
It was one of the discussions when we met last year at the end of the year, when we all met, remember, at the back of the school. It was one of the ideas that we had thrown around.
Well, you could always try it on a trial basis.
I don't think we're going to resolve this evening, and just for conversation purpose.
I just want to state something. I would just like all of us tomorrow, because what we just did, we basically put the city on notice that we sat up here, and this was my listening to the 7th year. I would just recommend, after what we all just admitted, that we have an extremely dangerous traffic situation around every one of our schools. So we have two options. We can now notify the police chief to get in an unmarked car or take an engine to see how it can survive to get through, or the next option is we all call our own personal lawyer, and as God forbid if there's a house fire or something and these engines get bottlenecked and somebody passes away, now that we just put this entire city on notice, that everybody sitting up here legally knows that we got a nightmare of a traffic problem.
Well, I don't think that the fire department, they usually have no problem getting through with the sirens and the size of those trucks. If they want to get through, they get through.
But the question we have, Mark, is like at White Neck, when I come through there, they park right up to the corners, right, to go straight through a road if they're coming down from Pawtucket Avenue. To try to take a left-hand turn, a lot of our, the traffic controls, they're putting traffic cones out earlier. If they can't get the traffic cones, right, that's what I'm saying. And some of these cars are being left unattended. If there's somebody sitting in the car and the rescue or the engine's trying to come by, but to go down some of these streets and to take a left or a right, I'd argue with anybody except the...
Like I said, hold on, please. Like I said, we're not going to resolve this evening. We as a council still have a number of issues, and we still have our agenda that we have to go through. Is 9:45 this evening. What I would recommend and what I would like to see, perhaps sometimes after the new year, and separate from a council meeting, that we have another meeting, perhaps in February or March, have another meeting, but it'll be just a special meeting, not a separate from the council meeting or a school committee meeting, because it'll just add on to the day, if that's the direction we want to continue.
I agree, Mr. President,
We don't have to make that time now, right? But for argument's sake,
We'll work with
I'm done with this
Officer Norton.
discussion.
We'll
I'm sure you
arrange a meeting
will.
with Officer Norton and go over all our traffic patterns.
Sure.
Okay?
Okay.
He's very accommodating.
good.
He's really wonderful to the school department. We
Yes.
thank you very
much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion for the school committee to adjourn.
Oh, I'll second that.
I'll make the motion and tell them, do you want a second or do you want to hold it? Because I'll let you can make the motion.
Yeah. No, I just asked for it.
Make the motion.
I'll second Ms. Oliver.
Well, thanks, Karen.
I make a motion that we do this all the time.
There's a motion and been seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for your time, and thank you for your input.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you for coming.
Bye, guys.
Good job. Good night. Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Bye, Charlie.
Work session.
All right. So before we proceed from where we left off,
No, we haven't done anything.
which we kind of jumped around, I have in front of me a public comment from early on. That's usually where we start.
Thank you very much.
And we have someone for public comment. Is it Gina LaRoche? Oh, is that you? Oh, okay. You've been waiting all this time for this?
I'm glad to be here.
Okay.
I will volunteer to be the safety police anytime. That's what I do. Speed has been an ongoing issue that plagues this city. And Rhode Island itself is congested. East Providence is getting very congested. And with, people speeding around, and they speed down side streets everywhere. Warren Ave is posted at 40 miles per hour, which, anybody, usually you do 50. That just scares me half to death. And I really would like us to think about the speed cameras. That would bring money into the city. That would help. I've said this so many times. Our law enforcement officials, they can't be omnipresent. They do a really good job, but as a city, as everything's, it's about safety. Our kids play, they walk. People drive around with insurance. They don't fix their brakes. I get that, but the speed cameras, Pawtucket and Providence have them. They are going well. 25 miles an hour. That feels like you get out and run, but guess what? You get used to it. And that would help us enforce and also bring money into the city. Warren Ave needs it the most. It connects Providence, and but that's all I have.
Well, thank you. Next item.
The next item is approval of consent calendar.
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Next item is appointments. Carousel Commission, regular member reappointment for vote, Joan Hanrahan Miller, and the term is from 11/19/2019 to 11/18/2022.
Moving to approve Ms. Miller's appointment. She has been on the Carousel Commission, and her term recently expired. She would like to be back on. She's completed all the paperwork, I understand. So moving to reappoint.
Second. I defer to Councilwoman.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. I noticed for the next one, we have Mayor's communication letter from the Finance Department. Is that part of the discussion, or?
That was the bonding letter that we received already.
It was for paperwork.
So we're good?
We're good with that.
We're good with that?
Just
All right.
for information.
Okay. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is Council Communications. Item A, Thanksgiving Food Drive for East Providence Family. And this is Councilwoman Souza.
So real quickly, just to remind the community that we are holding a canned food drive, non-perishable items, to help support families throughout our community here in East Providence. We have boxes here at City Hall in front of the clerk's office. I believe the police department also has a box there for drop-off. Those items will be donated to our Hope and Faith nonprofit organization that is instrumental in providing many different services to the community. There's about a week left, so I encourage anybody who hasn't brought some stuff in, please do so when you come to pay your water bill this month. That would be greatly appreciated. And a side note, because it didn't make it on the docket, but goes with this. We have our tree lighting event November 30th, which is a Saturday night here, so in 2 weeks at City Hall. We have our tree, if you haven't noticed, that went up yesterday by the DPW. They've started putting up some of the lights along Taunton Avenue. You'll see some of the other lights starting to be strung up around City Hall. We will be having a fun-filled night. Santa Claus will come, as he did last year, on the fire engine. In the city chambers, we will have the arts and crafts like we did last year, probably expanded a little bit more since it was such a hit last year. So I'll be helping man one of those art craft tables. We're going to have face painting, hot chocolate, goodies, refreshments, and it's all free and open to the public. So please come out Saturday night, make it a family night, and join us breaking the year open with our holiday season. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I could real quick, we have one gentleman who's been waiting here patiently from Planet Fitness for license approval. So I wonder if we might just move that one up so
Yes,
we can
please.
No problem
get
with
this poor
that.
guy out of here.
So that would be licensing not requiring public hearing for a vote, application for holiday sales, RISMA, EPV Fitness, LLC, doing business as Planet Fitness.
I know, you are.
Apologize for the delay, sir.
No problem. Thank you for your time. You guys have a lot of work to do, I can see.
Okay, so you're here for a license or opening Planet
We're a lot of
Fitness,
shapes.
which is in the former, it's in the Shores Plaza, right directly across from the high school.
Yes.
Okay. At the pleasure of the council, anyone have any questions?
Do we have an open day? Have you
Yeah,
guys
we're
set-
targeting to open December 31st at the latest. What's that? New Year's resolutions. Yeah, but us Americans, we always procrastinate, so February is actually more popular.
Mr. President, I would ask the clerk if all paperwork is in order.
Yes, all paperwork is in order.
Is this a public hearing? It's a public hearing. So-
No public hearing.
Oh, no public?
No.
I'm not requiring public hearing. I apologize.
Hearing none other dissension, I move approval.
Second.
She got it.
Everybody's anxious to get in there.
Thank you all.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you, sir, and good luck.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Apologize again for the delay. You waited 2.5 hours for 30 seconds.
It's a lot of endurance.
But you got it.
Welcome to the community.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Next is event approval, Ocean State Multi-Sport Race for vote. Don't think he's here. He left.
Okay.
I know where this race is taking place, what ward or what street, what date?
He was here for next year's turkey trot,
Yes.
Okay.
but he said this was the second time he was here.
Oh, so I don't have an issue with that. Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next item, please.
We will be going back to communications,
Yes.
and that's item B, which is holiday festivities schedule in Rumford.
This is just a public announcement. Just want to let the public know that on December 7th at 6 p.m., Hoyt and Wilson will be having our tree lighting ceremony. December 8th, which is a Sunday, from 1 to 3 p.m. at Hunts Mills, be having my hay ride in conjunction with the historical committee. They do their tours for the walks, for the trails that they have. And December 14th, 6 p.m., at the intersection of Pawtucket Avenue Center, I have another tree lighting ceremony over there. This will be on the docket for the next meeting, as well as a reminder, public announcement.
The
Thank you.
Widow family is providing refreshments for all events.
Hot chocolate, yes, we are, and music.
Next item.
Thank you. Next item.
Next item is Bread of Life fundraiser, recognizing David and Leslie Tenty.
A couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to attend a fundraiser and speak also regarding Bread of Life, which is located in the Newman Congregational Church. And the fundraiser was a lovely fundraiser. It was during the same time downtown Providence that they had veterans water fires, so you can only imagine what the traffic was like during that time. It was absolutely nuts and crazy. However, the fundraiser, I just want to thank David and Leslie Tente. In addition to those who served on that committee, they did a wonderful job. It was located at Waterfire Restaurant, so they had the opportunity of going out on the deck and seeing Waterfire, and they raised over $18,000 that evening. So again, my hat's off for Leslie and David Tente and those people who put that fundraiser together for the Bread of Life that's located in Newman Congregational Church. Thank you.
The next item is city budget discussion. Councilwoman Souza.
So at the pleasure of the council, I'd like to defer this to the next meeting, given our time constraints, and this is going to be a conversation that warrants a good, vibrant time and discussion. So I would like to defer that. If, Madam Clerk, you could put on the next council meeting, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Next item, please.
Next item is Pawtucket Avenue traffic safety. Councilwoman Souza.
So as our resident who just came up during public comment mentioned, traffic is an issue throughout the city. Speeding is an issue throughout the city. I have been in contact with the state. A lot of our traffic issues, besides our side streets, a majority of them come on our state roads because those are high traffic areas. And with that, I think we could do some due diligence on our part to try to work with the state to make them a little bit safer for not only our drivers but also our pedestrians, especially in our school zones where kids are now walking to and from school or walking to an area where they're getting picked up or dropped off. So one of the conversations that I had with the state regarding Pawtucket Avenue northbound at the intersection of Waterman Ave, where Providence Country Day and the Senior Center, is that vehicles going northbound have a difficult time to making left-hand turns onto Waterman Avenue. And there are accidents frequently, and there are near-miss accidents even more frequently. Coming southbound, there is a left turn signal that allows for people to make those turns. So I did reach out, like I said, to the state. They did, November 6th was a state traffic commission meeting. It was on the agenda for discussion, and they're working towards making that accommodation in that area to provide safe turning for vehicles in that area. So I just wanted to bring that update to light to let the council be aware of those requests that I've put in. I've also made some other various requests throughout Ward 2 in terms of having better signage. I know the state is big on bringing to the attention of wrong ways, pedestrian signage. There's been federal grants that have provided for the state to implement those signings. Roundabouts, as we know, something that the state has been working on. Six Corners, as people know, with that Taunton Avenue area is problematic with speed, with accidents, with foot traffic. So there's a lot of work being done on the state level. I do have some of our state delegates who have shown interest and reached out to me to also get on board and cheerlead for some of these things throughout our city, not just limited to Ward 2, but other areas throughout the city that have problematic areas. I'm not totally opposed to the idea or conversation of the traffic lights, speed cameras. I do think, and I've mentioned this a couple of years ago, that there are red light signals. So when a car is approaching at a high speed, it signals the red light to turn so that it slows them down as opposed to them continuing. There are also other options that we could use in other areas of the city, like speed bumps, and they're not fixed speed bumps. These are rubber ones that get laid out in the street so that people have to slow down before getting them. They can be removed for when plowing season comes and then placed back in the road. They're being used in the downtown Providence area, and they've been very effective. So just to let the residents know that that's happening. Also, just in case anybody's wondering, on Waterman Ave near between James Street and Ivory, the utilities have torn up the road and left a huge patch curb to curb now with the state law that they have to cut curb to curb when they're working on the street. A state road that has not been, it's been a couple of weeks since they have come out to pave that and close it. That in itself, that area is a huge speed bump, but it's reversed, so it dips. So just to let the residents of that area know, I have reached out to the state regarding that, for them to reach out to the utilities. I am making it public to the mayor's office and his director if they would like to weigh in on that, and also send a letter on behalf of the mayor's administration to get that taken care of as soon as possible. Thank you.
Next item, please.
The next item is bid award, multiplex adjustable fire alarm system, Commercial Electric Way Incorporated. For vote, Council Vice President Rodrick.
Just have a question on that. Was this a previous capital improvement project from the last council?
I don't think so. I was in discussion Director Catelli and Director Furtado, and it seemed to be of urgency, and I would defer to Mr. Catelli at this point.
It's been on the capital expense for probably 15 years, capital budget.
How much is that?
How much is the project? The project is $95,665.
And what's it entailed?
It's a full fire alarm system throughout, exit signs, above ceilings, below. We also need a full fire control panel, so it's a full-blown renovation.
So again,
master box,
which is kind of a requirement, right?
Should have been done 20 years ago.
Should have been done a long time ago. It's, as you've often said, Councilman, money was allotted, things weren't done, but it's time now to get it done, and certainly when we're talking about public safety, this and the next item, these are public safety items, capital funds are there.
I just don't understand how it takes 15 years to get to this point.
I don't either.
Years like the fire alarm system, the sprinkler system at the library. And then all of a sudden it becomes urgent, and then all of a sudden it becomes a public safety issue, and then it's put upon us that, if we don't vote on it, but, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
But the remedy is to not ignore it now.
So where is this money coming from?
It's in the capital account.
Is it part of the capital expenditure, or was it on the capital improvements for this year?
Yeah, this was
part of capital.
For this year?
Which section was that in this year's capital improvement project? Because I already looked through this.
I don't remember seeing it. That's right.
Either. That was not part of the capital improvement request for this budget, I can tell you right now.
What building are we referring to?
Commercial Way, 60 Commercial Way.
60 Commercial Way. Is that the DPW building?
No.
Yes.
This is not that.
And it's going to cost $96,000 to replace exit signs in that one building?
Well, it's not exit signs, it's a full-blown fire alarm system. So all devices and all the ceilings in the whole building, along with exit signs and
Which that building includes offices, right, personnel, staff. It isn't just a warehouse, right?
It's correct. It's mechanics, it's all
water
our offices, the water department, the recreation department, the parks department.
Do we have a reading on how much we had already approved for expenditures for the capital?
6 million, is that right? 1.6 million?
That was approved.
We're down to 1.5 left that we haven't touched yet.
Well, and to Mr. Morales' point, right, I mean, if this was part of a discussion that we had, we might have decided not to allocate funds for something else.
Right, this is
because
not
Now it's pushing.
at any point.
Yeah.
Now we have to. Well, we don't have to, but.
So one of my concerns, and this really kind of feeds off of this, doesn't have directly to do whether to approve or not to approve this, practice has always been, and I don't know if any of the other councils have received this, but after the council has had their final budget that they were approving, we had that final budget in hand that we could look at, review, made sure that that was the budget that we were approving, and that was the final hard copy. I don't know if any other council member has received a hard copy of the final budget to see what the numbers are for each of the departments and the capital improvement, but I'm still waiting for that. And if you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the responsibility of the Finance and Mayor's Department to do so, since they present the budget to the council and keep track of it? Because that makes things difficult, too. Like, we know what we did in our workshops, and I have a budget book that is my workbook that has tons of different numbers and notes allocated, but I don't have something clear-cut that says, all right, these were the final numbers that were agreed upon. So I'm a little disappointed and frustrated with this whole process this year, because I feel like it's not running appropriately the way it should be, and it feels kind of sneaky, to be quite honest.
Well, when we get the auditor report on the November 5th, when the city got it on the 5th of October, I find that to be a real issue.
Well, you're not happy with our budget process as a council, or what is it that?
So,
I thought we had a good process.
We did well,
Yeah.
but I don't have that sum of what each department was allocated as a final number. Usually we get that on the last day.
Right, we don't have the final version.
Right.
So, can I answer your question?
Yeah, please.
So, the charter says, upon final adoption, the budget shall be in effect for the budget year. A copy of the budget, as finally adopted, shall be certified by the mayor and the city clerk and filed in the office of the director of finance. The budget so certified shall be printed, mimeographed, or otherwise produced, and sufficient copies thereof shall be made available to all officers. But it doesn't have a time frame on it.
So has it been certified? You said want to certify. Has it been certified?
I don't believe it has. I don't know. I wouldn't know that.
In regards to the
final budget.
The final budget.
Yeah, I haven't received, the only thing I received was from the mayor. Well, actually, I didn't receive anything back from the mayor because the mayor didn't sign to approve, so I haven't received it. So Malcolm?
Sign what?
The final, the budget.
Maybe you could help us with what happens.
Well, the budget was approved without the mayor's signature, I think she's saying.
So I haven't received, so I haven't received it because it's just.
Right.
That's a resolution. Actually, she wants the detail, the actual budget detail.
Yeah.
So the budget's done, right? I mean, what we have is an ongoing capital discussion, right? We have a number of projects that the money has been allocated for that either haven't started or what have you, right? I mean, to me, the discussion is, we look back at some of these things for which money was allocated for. If we do not want to further allocate that remaining $1.5 million, we look at something that's been sitting there, obviously not that important for several years if it hasn't gotten done, and we take the money out of there and we put it in something that is important.
And I'm good with that, because if this is life and safety, which
it is,
to what you were saying, Councilman, but I don't know how it's gotten to this point, then we need to revisit what we had approved. If this is going to be 95, then we need to $95,000+ for this project here, and it is a life and safety. Then I personally don't have a problem with approving this with the intent that we go revisit another line item that we had approved and take that money out of that.
And that's to my point. If I don't have the list of all the approved ones in total, with the surplus that we didn't use, and then having an updated list. I mean, we have the list that the mayor gave from the previous, but if I don't have an accurate one that we approved for this budget year, then I can't make those.
Well, I assume Malcolm went to his office, he's going to come back, but the finance director should be able to tell us, is there money for this allocated or not?
Excuse me, it was allocated last year, so this is last year's capital.
This is last year. That's what I think, you said 15 years ago this has been allocated. I have the previous council's capital improvements, and it's not on here.
I put it on my capital budget, it doesn't, I don't know why it would be on there. I mean, I don't get it, it doesn't get approved, it's been out for 15 years concurrently.
But it's a capital improvement project that should be on here, and it's not on this list. The only thing I see on here is the next item, that may be a rubber roof flat replacement for the senior center. I'm assuming that's what that is.
That's correct.
It's $25,000 that was allocated from the last council. That's the only thing close to, what's on here from previous. So that $96,000, if it was allocated at the last council, from the last council, where is it on this capital improvement project? Next council meeting, we'll have something else that's going to need a dire emergency that we're going to have to vote on once again.
150, yeah. Central garage, fire safety. Yeah, 150,000 was allocated last year.
What about this year?
What's the item called? On the,
so that doesn't need
Garage,
approval.
Lakeland fire safety improvement.
okay.
It was appropriated, but not
Spent.
But now
for
what?
the fiscal year. So
Yeah, but I thought they had 2 years. I mean, going back to the other projects that we had discussed early on, and one being...
I misunderstood you. It's not about approving, we're approving a bid. So they went out to bid, and now we're just asking.
So where's the bid?
Huh?
Where's the bid information?
There was a bid. There was an
RFP.
Right, so, but has that been provided to us? Because what are we, it has?
Yeah.
It's in your council, it's in the council packet.
So it was allocated for what, 150, we allocated 150 in the past, and you're saying it comes to 96,000. I was under the understanding that this was for this year.
No, it's last year.
Approval
I'm
for this
sorry,
year.
my mistake.
Okay.
And I was on the understanding that this has been an ongoing issue that was 15 years in the making.
Yeah, well, it has been according to Ed.
Yeah, I just keep putting it on my capital budget, but I never get approved.
Right.
So I keep adding it every
So it
year.
finally got approved last year. Approved last year, but they didn't do it.
They didn't get the bid
No,
out.
they're looking to approve the contract because it exceeds.
Oh, the contract you're looking to approve.
Well, the charter requires that the council approve the bid of over $50,000. That's what we're doing tonight.
Okay.
Once we get that done, you will then be presented with a contract that reflects that bid.
Okay.
But we have to award the bid first.
We have to manage these agendas better. These are too humongous. We just met 2 weeks ago to have this much stuff, especially with the joint meeting tonight. I'm getting off my soapbox, but there's just too much stuff to review.
So then the rest of the money that was allocated, the 150, will go back into the general, the capital improvement fund, I'm imagining, right?
Yes.
And there should be a
I
balance.
think,
Yes.
I can't speak for the finance director, but I think when this came up with the budget,
That he mentioned that.
It stays in that
Yes.
prior year. Right. It's appropriated, but it's not, it's funded, it's not
Right.
appropriated. This is the appropriation.
Okay. I was under the understanding of something entirely different, that they were coming to the council for the money for this project.
That's how I took it.
Yeah.
And
All right,
that's
so
how I-
So it's
That being
a
said, I make a
no-brainer to
motion
me.
to approve, if it one isn't already on the table, the bid to be awarded to the multiplex addressable fire alarm system for the lowest bidder, lowest qualified bidder in the amount of $95,665.
Correct.
Commercial Electric Inc.
So if we could just hold off on that motion. There is a motion on
There is a motion on the floor. However,
Yeah, one.
the councilman is looking for the backup that was attached to the
The bid sheet.
agenda.
So the way I interpret this to begin with was that this was not
Yeah.
on last year's capital improvements projects.
Yeah, it was
okay?
approved.
But that's how I understood it. So I apologize for that.
Okay, no problem.
I took it as, this is something that's been in the making for 15 years, and now we need to address it. Okay, that's how I
It
took it.
finally got approved last year.
Okay, so I did find it on the previous capital improvement projects, that line item. We just found that and also the next one. So
Yeah.
And the only other thing that would help is, I mean, I've, in the past, have been familiar with working with a vote like this. You get the bids. You know, there were 3 bids publicly opened and read on such and such a day, and the recommendation is A or B. That's what we don't have.
You have the bid sheet? My understanding is
Where do we have the bid sheet?
in the packet.
I'm looking through the packet right now.
I don't have that.
I read through the packet, I didn't see it, I could have missed it, there's 8 million things in the packet.
Is that the project budget estimate?
Yes.
No, that's high school.
No, that's high school.
If the bids are coming into the law department's office...
No, they're not.
Where are they coming into?
Purchasing finance.
Okay, and then does a copy get sent to...
They don't have that.
So what happens is the
Yeah.
finance department, I believe, tabulates the bid sheet. They send the bid sheet, they send it to the director, or maybe Ed, the director whose department it is. I guess they review it, they make a recommendation. The recommendation, they provide us with the bid sheet with all the bidders, and then it comes to the law department to prepare, well, it goes to the law department so we can get it on the council agenda in accordance with the charter, so that you can now award a bid.
Right, so it does come to the law office. What time frame does it come to the law office?
I got this last week.
Okay, so last week Friday?
I don't remember the exact date. This is really handled by staff, to be honest with you.
Okay, so I guess the communication, as we know, is a big issue between departments, with the council. The council needs more than a weekend to go over the amount of materials that we have to look at, make decisions, where staff and other departments have multiple weeks to look over. And now we're making decisions on multiple topics that require us to look into, read, understand, follow-up questions that we may have. Some may think that 2 days or 3 days is a substantial amount of time, but some of us work full weekends and don't have the time to look at. Sometimes things don't come through because this is done electronically, so we know that there's always issues sometimes with emails. So in my opinion, I don't know if the rest of the council feels this way, I would like to have the opportunity to get this information with more time to look over it versus less time, especially when it comes to contracts that are usually more than one page to read over. And I know this isn't a contract, but it is a bid that was awarded, or...
Hasn't been awarded.
I know, I'm trying to correct myself, is seeking to be awarded, but I don't really have any background information.
Yeah, and here it is that it showed us physically, but we do not have this in our packet.
Well, I can't speak to why that is.
So it's probably a moot point at this point. I mean,
How did you have
it was approved last year.
Sorry, okay. Because it's in my packet, and we put the packets together, so I don't know.
I think minority members should have that in our packet.
Right. But it is the low bidder, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Correct. So it's the low bidder. It was approved last year. Let's not continue this.
And the councilwoman does have a motion on the floor for approval at this point in time.
I second that.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you.
We got the roof one too, right?
So, yeah, the next item is evidently the same issue, right? And
Last year's,
last year
as
approved.
well? Okay. And we're going to get them done this year, though, right?
correct.
Okay, very good.
And this was bid out in the spring, but because, and a lot of you guys are involved with construction, so you understand it, but when you do a bid in the spring, your prices are very high because everybody bids on schools and commercial buildings and the weather breaks and it gets crazy. So by bidding this in the fall, I saved $100,000.
Beautiful. Very good.
So there's a time when you do things too, you could do, and I only had 2 bids the first time, I only had 2 bids the second time, but after having the 2 bids, I said, we should wait because there's a lot of construction going on and people will put in a higher bid because they're very busy.
Right. And how much did the lowest bidder come in at?
The lowest bidder came at $372.
And how much was approved through the previous capital improvement?
It's a couple of different budgets. It's the fire chief, it's the senior center, so they kind of came in their capital budgets.
Okay, so it doesn't exceed the amount that was...
So, Council
It
President,
only exceeds in the senior center, and I'll have to take the rest of that out of my budget.
Right, so the senior center's The lowest qualified bidder, Liberty Roofing and Company, their bid came in at $36,000. The allocated funds were $25,000, so they're $11,000 over. I don't have, now the senior center, they have two, you're doing two systems, so there's a roofing and shingles.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you're doing rubber roof and shingle roofing on the senior
It's a small
center?
rubber roof that's attached to the new section of the senior center, so that's where all the equipment is, the HVAC.
Yeah, yep.
So that's the rubber roof.
Okay.
And then it's the older part of the senior center that's shingled. So that's the shingle roof. So it's a rubber and a shingle part of that contract.
And are they removing all of the previous? Are they layering on top of? What is the
No, rubber's being ripped off, shingles are being ripped off, going right to the deck.
deck? Okay. And does that include any potential damage that might be underneath?
We won't know that until it happens, but, usually they're pretty...
Well, I guess my
free and
question
clear.
is there any way, well, I guess that'll be in the contract if there's going to be any added expenditures beyond what we're approving tonight. Okay.
And once again, with roofs, my philosophy always has been, pay me now or pay me later. We learned this with our school department. We don't do this now, we might as well tack on a couple $100,000 next year. The money is in the budget, it was approved last year.
But I don't know how much was approved in the budget, right? I mean...
Yeah, well, we don't have it here, but he just said...
Well, we need to know.
Yeah, the fire department, $374,000, that's their capital last year.
Say again, Ed, please.
Fire department, $374,000 capital. So that bid came in at, actually, you have the tally sheet there.
286?
What is it? So
$286,000.
$90,000 less than what we had appropriated.
So why don't we just take the difference out of that and apply it to the seniors? Boom.
I don't know, yeah, we could.
Yeah, can we do that? I mean, if he came in at 90,000 less on one and 10,000 over on the other, there's still a savings as opposed to just coming out of your budget.
Bottom line savings.
But here's a key discussion, right? We allocated $150,000 for the one we just voted for, right? And we just awarded a bid for, what, 96, 97?
Yeah.
Right, so that's basically $54,000 that's now sitting in there that's not allocated for anything.
Right.
So that's something that we need to track meeting by meeting.
Right, and that's what I
Before it
mean.
gets spent on something else.
And it's the same with the fire department.
Yes.
The allocated from what they approved last year, it's $90,000 less.
Right.
All I was saying, and you're absolutely right, but, I mean, Mr. Catelli was saying that the difference of the $10,000 will come out of his budget, and I'm saying as opposed to it coming out of his budget, where he's had tremendous savings on, the overall, why don't we just take the money and kind of,
I see.
At some point in time, but for now, we'll just leave it the way it is.
Whenever we're awarding a bid, how you allocate that money at a later date is for a different day.
Okay, very good.
Make a motion to approve if there's not one on the
Okay.
table.
There isn't one on the table.
I make a motion to approve the bid to Liberty Roofing and Company, who is the lowest qualified bidder, in the amount of $372,000.
72 or 74?
72. $372,000.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call vote?
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
And then in 2 weeks, we'll draw up the contracts, and then you'll be able to review the contracts
Okay.
for approval.
So I just want to be clear before we move on. So this is a procedure that my staff tells me that has happened in the past. You get the bid sheets, the council awards the bid,
Yes.
come back with a contract. I don't know if you want more information, you tell me what more information you want, we'll include it. If you want the actual bids, the openings, I mean, we get you any information you want, but what we have been following has been done that predates the mayor, this is how town administrators did it in the past. They sent the council the bid sheet, and then you guys awarded the bid, and then we will award the contract.
And I think we understand that. However, we weren't aware of that these bids were approved last year, and we thought they were just being brought on.
No, I understand
now
that.
and this year.
I know, and I appreciate that, but Councilwoman indicated she would like more information. She needs more time to review them. I understand that you did not have the bid sheet.
We didn't have any of this
That's an internal error, and we can figure out what happened somewhere else. But if you want more than the bid sheet, we got to figure out.
And that's why,
that's fine.
Yeah.
and that's why when we were going over capital projects, I had asked Director Kudo and the mayor, I said, do you have priorities? These are two priority items. It wasn't really brought up to us at that time, because we still have a lot more to discuss that we've sort of tabled. We've gone over some, so I'm not asking a question, I guess, but I'm just saying, I tried to avoid what's happening tonight by saying, are there priorities that you need us to consider?
Yeah, I'm assuming, I can't speak for the mayor, but I'm assuming that because these were bid already and approved from last year's capital budget, they were in the process, we're just waiting for you to get the bids.
Okay.
That's why I brought your attention.
All right, so...
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to proceed.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that we extend the meeting 15 minutes to 10:55.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. We're going to proceed to city solicitors report.
They got H.
Is that where we are?
There's one more communication item.
There is?
Council rules.
Oh, I crossed that out for some reason.
I'll be quick.
So discussion of council rules, specifically
I'm not
Rule
trying to
5
rush it.
miscellaneous provisions. Councilman Morado.
So I put this on the docket because I think since January, we've had a constant issue, and I've asked this question numerous times. And this is going to be a question for you, Mr. Solicitor, and probably to do a little research on this.
Yep.
Okay, under Council Rule 5, Section L. Yep. Any member of the public who requests to speak on any docket item that is not part of the public hearing section or specifically on the docket will be allowed to speak if approved by unanimous consent of the council. My question to you is, who does that, other than the public, who does that also apply to? Does it apply to other politicians, city department heads? Like, I need to know that answer.
I will look into it for you. I will say, first, I'll look into it for you. I'll get back to you. I don't want to make a
Because as you know, this council and this docket's controlled by the legislative body.
Correct.
Of city government. Administrative or anyone else does not have, free reign of that podium. Am I correct in saying that? They can't just walk up to that podium at will, correct?
They could under public comment.
On the public comment, they're allowed the 3 minutes as
Correct.
any member of the public.
Correct.
But they can't feel as if any time they have a disagreement or that a debate that we're having up here, that they have to put in their 2 cents. And that's where I take issue with that. And that's where I would like you to give us a clarification and guidance on that.
So you want to know what the meaning of Section L means and whether other officials fall under that public.
Yes, and in absence also, if you can also look at I, Robert's Rules of Order.
What does that mean? What do you mean by that? Robert's Rules of Order shall prevail in the absence of any specific rule. I don't think Robert's rule will not tell you who can speak.
I just don't want to get it confused where if there's a word missing in there, like politicians, for example, or that doesn't apply to that group because it's only saying members of the public.
Well, I will give you a more thorough analysis, but I will tell you that by the use of the word public, and if you look at other sections of your rules, you actually specify mayor, city solicitor, so public is anyone else but the mayor, city solicitor, or any other office.
I just want clarification if, the mayor or anybody else can walk up to that podium at any time and put in their 2 cents and interrupt the council as we're debating or without being invited. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item is reports of other city officials. City Solicitor Mike Marcello.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, City Council President, members of the City Council. At the City Council met as a Claims Committee at 6:30, an executive session, and approved the following claims, sewer abatements unanimously in the following amounts. Sewer abatement of Julie Bailey, $976.48. Joseph Patello, $796.74. Luzanda Carballo, in the amount of $236.28. Lee Roulette, in the amount of $180.22. And James Sterigro, in the amount of $909.32. No other action of the City Council was taken on the other items on the executive session agenda.
And just for the record, the Joseph Patello is not the former city council person.
Thank you for that clarification.
Anyone like to make a motion to approve the city solicitor's report?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Next item is resolutions. The first item, item A, resolution authorizing the mayor to pay invoices for pre-construction expenses for the new East Providence High School, sponsored by Councilman Cahoon.
Same deal as always. Resolution's the same. The amount changes. The invoice is included in our packet. Multiple invoices, if you want to go through all of that. Councilwoman Souza, you asked me a couple of meetings ago to see if, keep a running tally on. So when we approve these invoices through tonight, that amount is $8,303. Rounded up to $3.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
I would take that in the form of a motion, Councilman.
I will make that motion to approve the resolution.
Second that.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, or
Next
resolution.
item is resolution encouraging all Rhode Islanders to participate in Census 2020 and be counted, sponsored by Council Vice President Rodrick.
Mr. President, I just want to go along with some other cities and towns that are encouraging this act in doing some research on veterans' numbers. Those numbers came from our last census of, would have been 2010, okay. So I'm sure they've changed a bit. I know that with funding for such things like free and reduced school lunches, they're based on census. For a lot of other things, the number of representatives we may or may not have in Congress, for federal and state funding, for projects we want to do in the city, everything goes by your last census. And I know they're planning a new census, so I received a suggestion that maybe we should get on board and encourage participation. I don't see this as a mandatory holding for us, but I agreed that it made sense to say we at least encourage to get the most current census possible, and therefore I agreed to put my name to the sponsorship of it. I would move approval.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
I just did want to add, I know that the city's doing workshops at libraries and such to help people with that signing up, and they've made themselves available. So if you need help with filling out any of those papers, have any questions, I would seek getting in touch with the mayor's office or going to the library and speaking to Mike and his staff. They're very helpful. Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Councilman Morado vote?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I got that.
I think I dozed off at that.
He's very soft-spoken.
Sometimes.
Next
Mr.
item.
President, just before we get to adjourn, I just want to point out, our next meeting is on the 3rd.
Yes.
I will not be present for that meeting. I'm going to be away for work.
And because it's on the 3rd, I want to wish everyone a happy and safe Thanksgiving.
And before we adjourn, I would like to thank the IT department. I know there's one gentleman here still. The photos that have been on continuous run throughout the meeting are 99% East Providence residents. Between Madam Clerk and myself, we received over 200 photos of area veterans, and they were able to put this together for us, and he did a nice job, and I want to thank you. I know there was a suggestion that maybe the monitor in the hallway, if possible, that this could run the rest of the month in tribute to Veterans Month in November, if you can do that. But I just want to give you a shout out and say thank you.
Would you, Councilman, would you be accepting additional photos if that's the case?
I can, and we could add them to this, so if someone wants to send one that didn't get a chance to.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Did I hear a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, well, there's one real ugly guy in there. You can throw those out and put some others in here.
Wah, wah.
Move for adjournment.
Second,
Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.